A disgraced family, a hidden lord, one woman's fight to rebuild everything or lose it all. Before we begin Eleanor Vance's journey from ruin to redemption, if you love stories of survival, courage, and unexpected love in the face of impossible odds, stay with us until the very end. You won't believe how this unfolds. And if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. We love knowing where our story travelers are joining us from. Now hit that like button and let's dive into a world where one woman's refusal to bow down changes everything. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, which Eleanor would later think was fitting. Tuesdays had always been unremarkable days, the kind that slipped past without notice. But this particular Tuesday brought an envelope so thick with wax seals and expensive paper that their landlady, Mrs. Whitmore, had nearly refused to hand it over, convinced it was some cruel joke. Eleanor stood in the cramped parlor of their rented rooms above the milliner's shop, turning the envelope over in her hands. Her youngest sister, Beatrice, pressed against her side, eyes wide with the kind of hope that Eleanor had learned to crush before it could take root. "Is it from Father?" Beatrice whispered. "Father is dead to us," their middle sister, Judith, said from the window seat, not looking up from her mending. Her needle moved with sharp, angry precision through the fabric. "The moment he boarded that ship to escape his debts, he became a ghost." "Judith." Their mother's voice drifted from the bedroom, weak and spapery. "Don't speak ill." "I'll speak however I please, Mother. We're living in 2 rooms above a hat shop because he gambled away everything we had and then ran like a coward." Eleanor broke the seal before the argument could spiral further. They'd had this fight 17 times in the past month. She'd counted. The letter was from someone calling herself Lady Catherine Pembroke, a distant cousin on their father's side whom Eleanor had never met. The words swam before her eyes at first: countryside estate, generous offer, restorative air. But the meaning crystallized like ice forming on a window. They were being offered charity. "What is it?" Beatrice tugged at her sleeve. Eleanor read it aloud, her voice flat. With each sentence she watched her sisters' faces shift. Beatrice lit up with naive excitement. Judith's mouth twisted into something bitter. From the bedroom, their mother made a small sound that might have been relief or despair. "We're not going." Eleanor folded the letter with deliberate care. "Eleanor," her mother started, "we are not accepting handouts from people who ignored us when Father was merely struggling but now swoop in like vultures to observe our complete destruction." "That's not fair," Beatrice said. "Maybe she's just being kind." Eleanor looked at her youngest sister, 16 and still somehow believing in kindness from strangers. "Kind people don't wait until you're desperate. They help before you're ruined." "And what's your grand plan?" Judith set down her mending, finally looking at Eleanor directly. "We have 6 weeks before we can't pay rent. Mrs. Whitmore has already told me she's had inquiries about these rooms from a clerk and his wife. We have no income, no prospects, and Mother is too ill to work even if anyone would hire a gentlewoman's widow." The words hung in the air like smoke. Eleanor hated that Judith was right, hated it with a fury that made her hands shake. "I could seek a position," Eleanor said. "As a governess, or—" "No one will hire you." Judith's bluntness was like a slap. "We have no references, and the Vance name is poison now. Every door in this city is closed to us." "Then I'll use a different name." "And what happens when they discover who you really are?" "We'll be worse off than before." Eleanor wanted to argue, but the fight drained out of her. She was 23 years old and responsible for 3 other people's survival, and every option before her was painted in shades of humiliation. That night, while her sisters slept, Beatrice curled on the narrow bed they shared, Judith rigid on her cot as if even in sleep she wouldn't allow herself comfort. Eleanor sat by the single candle they permitted themselves after dark and reread the letter. The estate was called Thornfield Park. It sat in the countryside of Derbyshire, far from London's watchful eyes and wagging tongues. Lady Catherine promised separate quarters, no obligations, and time to recover from your recent misfortunes. Recover. As if their father's disgrace was a cold they could sleep off, but the alternative was the street. Eleanor had walked past enough desperate women huddled in doorways to know what happened when you had no money and no name to protect you. She'd seen the hollow eyes, the bruised faces, the way they disappeared into the city's dark corners. She would not let that happen to Beatrice. At dawn, she wrote their acceptance. The journey to Derbyshire took 4 days by coach, which was 3 days longer than it should have taken because Eleanor had sold their father's watch to pay for the cheapest possible passage. They stopped at rundown coaching inns where the sheets were questionable and the food was worse. Judith complained constantly. Their mother grew weaker with each jarring mile. Beatrice tried to make it an adventure, pointing out landmarks and spinning stories about the places they passed, until even her optimism wore thin. Eleanor said little. She kept her ledger book balanced on her knee and calculated their remaining funds down to the last shilling, as if the numbers might reveal some solution she'd missed. They arrived at Thornfield Park on a gray afternoon that threatened rain. The estate rose from the landscape like something from a Gothic novel, all dark stone and severe lines with gardens that had been allowed to grow wild in places. It wasn't neglected exactly, but it had an air of solitude, as if the house itself had withdrawn from society. A stern housekeeper named Mrs. Fairweather met them at the door. She looked them over with the kind of assessment Eleanor had grown used to, the slightly too worn traveling clothes, the careful mending on Judith's sleeves, the way their mother leaned heavily on Eleanor's arm. "Lady Catherine is taking tea in the morning room," Mrs. Fairweather said. "She'll see you once you've refreshed yourselves." They were shown to a suite of rooms in the east wing, 3 bedrooms connected by a shared sitting room. It was more space than they'd had in months, with real furniture and windows that looked out over the grounds. Beatrice actually laughed when she saw the beds. "There's so much room," she breathed, spinning in a circle. Judith ran her hand over the writing desk, checking for dust. Finding none, she looked almost disappointed. Eleanor helped their mother to bed, then stood at the window and studied the grounds. The gardens gave way to open fields, and beyond that, dark woods. It was beautiful in a wild, unkempt way, nothing like the manicured parks of London where they'd once taken Sunday strolls. That life felt like someone else's memory now. An hour later, they were summoned to meet Lady Catherine. The woman who rose from her chair as they entered was not what Eleanor expected. She was perhaps 60, with iron gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She wore black, mourning clothes, though for whom Eleanor couldn't guess, and her jewelry was minimal but clearly expensive. "Mrs. Vance, Miss Vance, Miss Judith, Miss Beatrice." She nodded to each of them in turn. "Please sit. Mrs. Fairweather, bring more tea." They arranged themselves on the sofa like birds on a wire, Eleanor in the center with her sisters flanking her and their mother on her right. Lady Catherine studied them over the rim of her teacup. "I knew your father," she said without preamble. "Not well, but our families were connected generations back. I was sorry to hear of his difficulties." "Difficulties?" Judith's voice was acid. "Is that what we're calling fraud and embezzlement now?" "Judith?" Eleanor's warning was quiet but firm. Lady Catherine's expression didn't change. "I appreciate plain speaking, Miss Judith. Yes, your father made catastrophic errors in judgment. He destroyed his business partners along with his own family. I won't pretend otherwise." Eleanor felt something crack open in her chest. After months of pitying looks and whispered scandals, here was someone willing to acknowledge the truth without dressing it in false sympathy. "However," Lady Catherine continued, "I don't believe children should pay for their parents' sins. You're here because you need sanctuary, and I have the means to provide it. I ask very little in return." "What do you ask?" Eleanor met her gaze directly. "Honesty, discretion, and an understanding that while you're under my roof, you represent my household. There are certain expectations in society, even here in the country. I trust you'll comport yourselves appropriately." It was a warning, Eleanor realized. Behave, or you'll be cast out again. "We're grateful for your generosity," Eleanor said, the words tasting like metal. "We won't disappoint you." "See that you don't." The meeting ended shortly after. As they walked back to their rooms, Beatrice chattered about how nice everything seemed, how Lady Catherine wasn't as frightening as she'd thought. Judith remained silent, which was somehow worse than her complaints. Their mother paused at the top of the stairs, breathing hard. "We must make this work, Eleanor. We have nowhere else to go." "I know." That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She stood at her window and watched the moon rise over the wild fields. thinking about all the ways they could fail here, all the ways they'd already failed. She was so tired of being grateful for scraps, tired of measuring her words and curbing her anger and pretending that everything was fine when nothing was fine, when their entire world had collapsed and everyone seemed to think they should just accept it with grace. Her father had been a fool and a coward, but the men who'd enabled him, who'd looked the other way at his accounting tricks and his gambling debts until it became public scandal, they'd walked away unscathed. They still had their businesses, their reputations, their comfortable lives. While Eleanor stood in a borrowed room, dependent on the charity of a woman she'd never met, trying to figure out how to keep her family fed and sheltered with no money and no prospects and no power, she pressed her forehead against the cold glass and made herself a promise. She would never be powerless again. Whatever it took, whatever she had to do, she would find a way to rebuild. Not for gratitude or approval, but for the simple, fierce right to exist on her own terms. The moon cast long shadows across the grounds, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called out into the night. Eleanor didn't know it yet, but her battle for survival was about to begin in earnest. The first week at Thornfield passed in uncomfortable adjustment. They learned the household rhythms: breakfast at 8, luncheon at 1, dinner at 7. Lady Catherine kept to herself mostly, appearing for meals and occasionally for tea, but otherwise leaving them to their own devices. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like waiting for a trap to spring. Eleanor spent her days trying to make herself useful. She helped their mother settle in, made sure Beatrice kept up with her reading, and tried to ignore Judith's increasingly dark moods. She also explored the estate, mapping out the gardens and grounds with the careful attention of someone planning escape routes. On the 8th day, she walked farther than before, following a path that wound through the manicured gardens into the wild meadow beyond. The grass was high here, dotted with late summer flowers. The house disappeared behind a rise in the land, and for the first time since arriving, Eleanor felt like she could breathe. She kept walking, drawn by the promise of solitude, until she reached a stone wall marking what must be the property boundary. Beyond it, fields stretched toward dark woods. The landscape was beautiful in its emptiness. No people, no expectations, just land and sky. Eleanor climbed over the wall, her skirts catching on the rough stone. She didn't care. She needed to be somewhere that wasn't Thornfield, wasn't London, wasn't anywhere she had to perform gratitude or strength or any of the other exhausting roles she played. The field on the other side was rougher, the ground uneven. She picked her way through it, not really looking where she was going, just moving. The physical exertion felt good, like she was working something out of her system, which was why she didn't see the rabbit hole until her foot was already in it. She went down hard, her ankle twisting beneath her with a snap that she felt more than heard. Pain exploded up her leg, white-hot and immediate. She bit down on her cry, but a sound escaped anyway, half gasp, half sob. "Damn it," she hissed, trying to pull herself up. Her ankle wouldn't bear weight. When she looked down, it was already swelling, the boot suddenly too tight. This was how she'd die, Eleanor thought with dark humor. Not from poverty or scandal, but from a stupid accident in a field because she couldn't even take a walk without catastrophe finding her. She tried to stand again, using the wall for support. The pain made her vision swim. Her ankle buckled and she went down again, this time onto her hands and knees in the rough grass. "Perfect," she muttered. "Just perfect." "You might want to stop trying that." Eleanor's head snapped up. A man stood about 20 feet away, watching her with the kind of calm that suggested he'd been there for a while. He was tall, dressed in plain work clothes, worn trousers, a simple shirt with the sleeves rolled up, boots that had seen heavy use. His hair was dark and a bit too long, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in his surroundings. A farmhand, Eleanor assumed, or a groundskeeper from one of the neighboring estates. "I can manage," she said, because even injured and humiliated, pride was a hard habit to break. He tilted his head slightly. "Can you?" "Yes." "Then by all means continue. I'll watch." The amusement in his voice made her want to throw something at him. Instead, she gritted her teeth and tried once more to stand. Her ankle gave out immediately, and she collapsed back onto the grass with a sound of frustration. The man crossed the distance between them in a few long strides. "May I?" He gestured to her injured foot. Eleanor wanted to refuse, but practical sense won out over pride. Fine. He knelt beside her, his movements careful and deliberate. When he touched her ankle, his hands were gentle despite their obvious strength. I'm going to remove your boot. This will hurt. I'm aware. She cut off with a sharp intake of breath as he eased the boot off. The relief of pressure was immediate, followed by a fresh wave of pain as her ankle swelled further. He examined it with the kind of focused attention that suggested he'd dealt with injuries before. Not broken, he said after a moment, but badly sprained. You won't be walking on it for a while. Wonderful. Can you make it back to Thornfield on one foot if I help you, or should I carry you? I am not being carried. The wall is nearly a quarter mile. Your pride will last about 10 steps. He was probably right, but Eleanor refused to admit it. I'll manage with help. He studied her for a moment, and she had the distinct impression he was trying not to smile. As you wish. He helped her up, one arm around her waist for support. Eleanor put her weight on her good foot and immediately realized the problem. She couldn't hop a quarter mile. She couldn't even make it 20 feet. They managed 5 steps before she had to stop, breathing hard from pain and frustration. This is ridiculous, she said. Yes. I don't even know your name. Lucas Hale. He shifted his grip slightly. And you're Eleanor Vance. She looked at him sharply. How do you know that? You're staying at Thornfield. There isn't much that happens in the area that everyone doesn't know within a day. He paused. May I carry you now, or would you prefer to argue until your ankle swells to twice its current size? Eleanor closed her eyes and counted to 5. Fine. He picked her up with an ease that should have been embarrassing, but somehow wasn't. Maybe because he didn't make it feel like a defeat, just a practical solution to a practical problem. For what it's worth, he said as he started walking, rabbit holes are a menace. You're not the first person to fall victim. That's not as comforting as you seem to think it is. I wasn't trying to comfort you. I was making conversation. Despite everything, Eleanor felt a laugh try to escape. She swallowed it down. Well, you're terrible at it. So I've been told. They walked in silence for a while, Lucas's pace steady and unhurried. Eleanor tried not to think about how long it had been since anyone had helped her without expecting something in return, or how strange it felt to be carried by a man she'd met 5 minutes ago and somehow not feel afraid. Why were you out here? She asked finally. I could ask you the same thing. I needed to walk. So did I. But this is your land. Is it? Eleanor frowned. Isn't it? You were on this side of the wall. Walls don't mean much out here. Land runs together. People cross back and forth all the time. He glanced down at her. Why did you really come out this far? The honest answer, because I needed to escape, because I can't breathe in that house, because I'm so tired of pretending to be grateful, stuck in her throat. I wanted to see the woods. They're just trees. I've never lived anywhere with proper woods before. London? Yes. She hesitated. How did you know? Your accent, and the way you walk, or walked before the ankle, like someone used to pavement, not fields. I'll take that as an insult to my outdoorsmanship. It wasn't an insult, just an observation. They'd reached the wall. Lucas set her down carefully on top of it, then climbed over himself before helping her down the other side. The house was visible now across the meadow, looking even more severe in the afternoon light. I can make it from here, Eleanor said. Can you? I can hop. You can also accept help without treating it like surrender. The words hit harder than they should have. Eleanor looked at him, really looked, and found herself caught by eyes that were more gray than blue and far more perceptive than she'd expected from a farmhand. Why are you helping me? She asked. Because you're injured and I'm not an ass. Most people would have just pointed me toward the house. I'm not most people. He offered his arm again. Come on, we'll take it slow. They made their way across the meadow together, Lucas adjusting his pace to her hobbling gait. When they reached the gardens, Mrs. Fairweather appeared on the terrace, her expression shifting from stern to alarmed in an instant. Miss Vance, what happened? I twisted my ankle. Mr. Hale was kind enough to help me back. The housekeeper's eyes went to Lucas, and something strange crossed her face, recognition mixed with what might have been concern. "Mr. Hale, we weren't expecting you. I was passing through when I encountered Miss Vance." His tone was polite, but offered no elaboration. Mrs. Fairweather seemed to gather herself. "Of course. Please, bring her inside. I'll send for Dr. Morrison." "That's not necessary," Eleanor started to protest. "It absolutely is," Mrs. Fairweather said firmly. "Lady Catherine will insist." Lucas helped Eleanor into the house and to a chair in the drawing room. Mrs. Fairweather bustled off to send for the doctor, leaving them momentarily alone. "Thank you," Eleanor said quietly, "for helping me. You already thanked me. Twice. Then I'll stop before I seem desperate." A smile tugged at his mouth, the first real one she'd seen. "You don't seem desperate. You seem stubborn." "That's not a compliment." Wasn't meant as an insult either. Footsteps approached, and Lady Catherine appeared in the doorway. Her gaze went from Eleanor to Lucas, and her expression did something complicated. "Lucas," she said, "what brings you to Thornfield?" "Lady Catherine." He inclined his head with a respect that seemed genuine. "I found Miss Vance injured in the North Field. I thought it best to see her home." "How fortunate you were nearby." Lady Catherine's tone was dry. "Eleanor, are you badly hurt?" "Just a sprain, I think." "Dr. Morrison will confirm." "Lucas, will you stay for tea? I imagine you have business to discuss." "Another time, perhaps. I should be getting back." He turned to Eleanor, and for a moment their eyes met. "Be careful with that ankle. Stay off it for at least a week." "I'll try." "Don't try. Do it." Then he was gone, striding out of the house with the same easy confidence he'd shown in the field. Eleanor watched him go, something strange settling in her chest. Lady Catherine moved to sit across from her. "Well, that was unexpected." "Who is he?" Eleanor asked. "Really?" "Lucas Hale." Lady Catherine's expression gave nothing away. "A neighbor. He owns the land that borders Thornfield to the north." "He's a landowner?" "Among other things." She paused. "Why do you ask?" "He was dressed like a farmhand." "Lucas has never much cared for appearances. It's one of his more refreshing qualities." Lady Catherine studied her. "What did you think of him?" Eleanor wasn't sure how to answer that. "He was helpful." Lady Catherine's eyes glinted with something that might have been amusement. "I'm sure he was." Before Eleanor could respond, Dr. Morrison arrived, an elderly man with gentle hands who confirmed the sprain and prescribed rest, elevation, and laudanum for the pain. By the time he finished, Eleanor was exhausted from trying to maintain composure through the examination. Judith helped her upstairs, her silence somehow accusatory. "What?" Eleanor finally asked as they reached her room. "Nothing." "You're never quiet for no reason." Judith helped her onto the bed with rough efficiency. "Just wondering how you managed to injure yourself in a field. You're usually so careful." "It was an accident." "Of course it was. Or sit." Judith moved to the window looking out over the grounds. "And the man who helped you, he just happened to be there?" "Yes." "How convenient." "What are you implying?" Judith turned, and her expression was hard. "I'm not implying anything. I'm just noting that we've been here a week, and you've already attracted the attention of a wealthy landowner. That's quite an accomplishment." The accusation stung precisely because it touched on Eleanor's own discomfort. "I fell in a rabbit hole, Judith. I didn't orchestrate a meeting." "If you say so." "What do you want me to say? That I'm scheming to seduce him? That this is all some elaborate plan? I want you to remember that we're here on sufferance. One wrong step and we're back on the street. So maybe think twice before cultivating relationships with men who are so far above our current station that even speaking to them could be seen as presumption." Judith left before Eleanor could respond, closing the door with careful precision that was somehow worse than slamming it. Eleanor lay back against the pillows, her ankle throbbing in time with her pulse. She wanted to be angry at Judith's insinuation, but she couldn't quite manage it, because under the accusation was something worse. Fear. Fear that they were balanced on a knife's edge, that any misstep would send them tumbling. And maybe Judith was right. Maybe Eleanor should have been more careful, should have stayed within sight of the house. should have guarded herself better. But she was so tired of being careful, so tired of measuring every word and action against the possibility of ruin. She closed her eyes and thought about Lucas Hale's steady hands and sharp eyes, the way he'd helped her without making it feel like charity, the way he'd argued with her like she was worth arguing with. It had been a long time since anyone had treated her like she was more than her family's shame. And that, Eleanor realized, was the most dangerous thing of all. The ankle took longer to heal than Dr. Morrison predicted, which Eleanor suspected had less to do with the injury and more to do with her refusal to stay in bed. She'd spent 3 days confined to her room before the walls started closing in, and then she'd fashioned a walking stick from a broken broom handle and declared herself mobile enough for short excursions. Judith had stopped speaking to her entirely, which was almost a relief. Beatrice hovered like a worried sparrow, bringing books and tea and nervous conversation that made Eleanor want to scream. Their mother had taken to her bed with what she called nervous exhaustion, which Dr. Morrison diagnosed as melancholy and prescribed rest for, as if rest was something any of them could afford. Lady Catherine watched it all with those sharp eyes that missed nothing, saying little but somehow making her disapproval felt in the quality of her silence. Eleanor hobbled downstairs on the 4th morning to find the breakfast room occupied by 2 women she'd never seen before. They were younger than Lady Catherine, but older than Eleanor, perhaps in their 30s, dressed in the kind of expensive simplicity that screamed old money. They stopped talking when Eleanor entered, their gazes sweeping over her with the cold assessment of women who knew exactly how to spot weakness. "Ah, Eleanor," Lady Catherine gestured to a chair. "Allow me to introduce Mrs. Helena Ashford and her sister, Miss Caroline Winters. They're neighbors from Millbrook Manor, just beyond the woods. Ladies, this is my distant cousin, Miss Eleanor Vance." "How lovely to meet you." Helena's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We've heard so much about your family's arrival." "I'm sure you have." Eleanor sat carefully, positioning her injured ankle where it wouldn't be obvious. Pride was stupid, but it was also all she had left. "Such a tragedy. What happened to your father?" Caroline's voice dripped with false sympathy. "These financial scandals are so devastating. One day you're respectable, the next you're, well," she gestured vaguely as if their current state spoke for itself. "Quite." Eleanor reached for the teapot, pleased when her hand didn't shake. "We were just telling Lady Catherine about the assembly next week," Helena continued. "It's a small affair, of course, just local families. But we thought it might be nice for your sisters to attend. Give them a chance to meet people their own age." Eleanor knew a trap when she heard one. "How generous." "Of course, given your circumstances, perhaps it would be better if you stayed behind. You're still recovering, and I imagine the dancing would be difficult with that ankle." Helena's tone was all concern, but her eyes were calculating. "I'm sure Eleanor will make her own decisions about what she can manage," Lady Catherine said coolly. "More tea, Helena?" The conversation shifted to local gossip, who was courting whom, which estates were struggling, the shocking behavior of someone's daughter in York. But Eleanor felt the weight of their judgment like a physical thing. They'd come to inspect her, to confirm whatever assumptions they'd already made about the disgraced Vances. When they finally left, Eleanor stayed in her chair, staring at nothing. "Don't let them rattle you," Lady Catherine said. "Helena's been trying to marry Caroline off for 5 years. She sees competition everywhere." "I'm hardly competition for anyone." "You're young and not entirely unfortunate looking. That makes you dangerous in her eyes." Lady Catherine paused. "Will you attend the assembly?" "Should I?" "That depends on whether you're brave enough to face them all at once, or prefer to be picked off one by one at individual calls." Eleanor laughed, the sound bitter. "When you put it that way, the choice is yours, child. But hiding won't make them go away. It'll just confirm everything they already think about you." After Lady Catherine left, Eleanor sat alone in the breakfast room and thought about survival. Not the kind where you scraped by one day at a time, but the kind where you actually lived instead of just enduring. She was so tired of enduring. The door opened and Beatrice slipped in, her face anxious. "Was it awful?" "I heard voices." "It was fine. Judith said they came to gawk at us, like we're some kind of curiosity." "Judith says a lot of things." Beatrice sat down across from her, twisting her hands together. Are we really going to an assembly? I don't know how to act at those things. Father never let us go to proper balls. You'll be fine. Just smile and don't let anyone see you're nervous. That's terrible advice. It's the only advice I have. Beatrice was quiet for a moment, then asked softly, "Do you think we'll ever be normal again? Have real lives, not just this?" Eleanor wanted to lie, to offer comfort, but she'd never been good at pretty falsehoods. "I don't know. Maybe normal isn't something we get anymore." "That's depressing." "It's honest." Beatrice stood, her jaw set with sudden determination. "Well, I'm going to the assembly, and I'm going to dance and smile and pretend everything is fine until it actually is." Eleanor watched her sister leave, envying that stubborn optimism. She'd lost hers somewhere between their father's confession and the moment she'd realized how completely they'd been abandoned by people who'd claimed to care. Her ankle throbbed, a steady reminder of her own stupidity. She should have been more careful, should have stayed within sight of the house, should have... A knock on the window made her jump. Lucas Hale stood on the terrace, gesturing for her to come outside. Eleanor stared at him, her heart doing something complicated, then grabbed her makeshift walking stick and hobbled to the door. "What are you doing here?" she asked, stepping out into the cool morning air. "Checking on my patient. How's the ankle?" "Healing slowly." "What are you really doing here?" He held up a basket. "Brought you something." He pulled out a proper walking stick, polished wood with a curved handle, perfectly sized for her height. "Figured you'd try to walk before you should. Might as well do it properly." Eleanor took it, testing the weight. It was infinitely better than her broom handle. "Thank you, but you didn't have to." "I know I didn't have to. I wanted to." He studied her face. "You look tired. Flattery will get you nowhere." "Good thing I wasn't trying to flatter you." He gestured to the gardens. "Walk with me? Or is that against the rules?" "What rules?" "The ones that say proper young ladies don't walk alone with strange men." "You're not that strange. And I stopped being proper the day my father destroyed our name." But something shifted in his expression, not pity, but understanding. "Fair enough. Come on, then." They walked slowly, Lucas adjusting his pace to her hobble. The morning was bright and cool, the kind of weather that made Eleanor miss autumn in London before she remembered she'd hated autumn in London too. "I met some of your neighbors this morning," she said, "Mrs. Ashford and Miss Winters." "Ah, the welcoming committee. Is that what we're calling it? Helena fancies herself the guardian of local society. She probably came to determine whether you're a threat or just entertainment." "And which am I?" Lucas looked at her sideways. "Depends on the day, I'd imagine." Despite herself, Eleanor smiled. "They invited us to an assembly next week. Well, invited my sisters, made it very clear I should probably stay home." "Are you going?" "I haven't decided." "Liar." She stopped walking, turning to face him. "Excuse me?" "You've already decided. You're going because not going would be letting them win, and you'd rather walk through fire than give them that satisfaction." The accuracy of it stole her breath. "You don't know me well enough to make that assumption." "Don't I?" He moved closer, not touching but near enough that she could see the gray flecks in his eyes. "You walked into a field on a bad ankle because you needed space more than you needed safety. You're here instead of London because you chose your family's survival over your pride. Everything about you says you'd rather fight than surrender." "That sounds exhausting." "It probably is." They stood there for a long moment, something crackling in the air between them. Eleanor wanted to step back, to retreat into the careful distance she'd maintained with everyone since arriving at Thornfield, but she also wanted to stay exactly where she was, pinned by the weight of being seen. "I should go back," she said finally. "People will talk." "Let them." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one being judged." "You'd be surprised." He stepped back, giving her space. "Come by tomorrow. I'll show you the North Woods if you're interested. Better views, fewer rabbit holes." "Is that proper?" "Probably not, but you just said you stopped caring about proper." He left before she could respond, striding across the lawn with that same easy confidence. Eleanor watched him go, her heart beating too fast, her thoughts tangled. Judith appeared on the terrace, arms crossed. "Making friends with the locals?" "Walking. The doctor said I should move around. With him? He brought me a walking stick. It would have been rude not to accept. How convenient that he keeps appearing when you need rescuing. Eleanor limped past her sister, too tired for this argument again. If you have something to say, just say it. Fine. You're playing with fire. Lucas Hale isn't some farmhand you can charm and discard. He's a landowner, probably wealthy, definitely connected. And you're… What? Say it. Judith's face twisted. You're a scandal waiting to happen. We all are. The daughter of a criminal living on charity with no prospects and no future. If you think he's interested in anything beyond temporary amusement, you're deluding yourself. The words landed like blows, precise and painful. Eleanor wanted to argue, but what defense did she have? Judith was right. They were ruined, dependent, powerless. Whatever Lucas's intentions were, they couldn't possibly be serious. I'm not deluding myself about anything, Eleanor said quietly. I know exactly what we are. You don't have to keep reminding me. She left Judith on the terrace and made her way upstairs, each step sending pain shooting through her ankle. Their mother was awake when Eleanor checked on her, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. How are you feeling? Eleanor asked. Tired. Always so tired. Her mother's voice was thin, papery. Did I hear voices earlier? Lady Catherine had visitors, neighbors. Did they ask about us? About your father? They danced around it politely. Her mother turned her head, finally looking at Eleanor. I'm sorry. For what? For not being stronger, for not being able to help you carry this. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, taking her mother's hand. You don't have to apologize. I married him knowing he was ambitious. I thought it was a good thing, that drive. I didn't realize ambition could rot from the inside until it became something monstrous. She closed her eyes. He was a good man once. Or maybe I just needed to believe he was. It doesn't matter now. Doesn't it? You're living with the consequences of my poor judgment. All of you are. Eleanor had no answer to that. They sat in silence until her mother drifted back to sleep, and then Eleanor returned to her own room and stared at the walking stick Lucas had brought. She should keep her distance, should focus on surviving Thornfield, on keeping her family together, on finding some way to build a future from the wreckage of their past. Getting involved with Lucas Hale, whatever that even meant, was a complication she couldn't afford. But when tomorrow came, she found herself walking toward the North Woods anyway. He was waiting where the manicured gardens gave way to wilderness, leaning against a tree and reading what looked like a book of poetry. He looked up when she approached, and something in his expression made her stomach flip. You came. Against my better judgment. That seems to be a theme with you. He tucked the book into his coat pocket and offered his arm. Ready? The woods were different from the fields, darker, quieter, with a kind of ancient stillness that made Eleanor want to whisper. Lucas led her along a narrow path that wound between massive oaks and birches, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the land. My family's owned this property for 3 generations, he said. My grandfather bought it when he made his fortune in shipping. My father expanded it. I'm apparently supposed to continue the tradition of acquisition, but I've never much cared for empire building. What do you care for? He was quiet for a moment, considering. Making things work properly. The land, the tenants, the crops. Fixing what's broken instead of just replacing it. That's almost philosophical. Is it? Most men I've known would just say they want money and power. Most men are idiots. Eleanor laughed, the sound surprising her. When had she last laughed without bitterness? You're very confident in your opinions. I found that being uncertain just makes people nervous. Better to commit to a position and adjust if you're wrong. They emerged from the woods onto a hilltop that overlooked the valley. The view was stunning, fields and forests stretching to distant hills, the whole landscape painted in shades of gold and green under the afternoon sun. This is beautiful, Eleanor said softly. I come here when I need to think, or when I need to remember that most of what we worry about is smaller than we think. She looked at him sharply. That sounds like you're about to tell me my problems don't matter. Your problems matter, but so does perspective. He sat down on a fallen log, gesturing for her to join him. Tell me about London. Why? Because you never talk about it. You talk around it, but never directly. Eleanor sat carefully, favoring her ankle. There's nothing worth telling. Try me. She didn't know why she started talking. Maybe because he didn't push, didn't demand, just waited. Maybe because the distance from London made it feel like something that had happened to someone else. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. My father had a shipping business, not huge, but successful enough. We had a house in Bloomsbury, went to church on Sundays, had people over for dinner. Normal things. She paused. Boring things, really, but they were ours. What happened? He got greedy, started taking risks, making deals with people who had more money than sense. Then he started lying about the accounts, inflating values, promising returns he couldn't deliver. By the time anyone noticed, he'd built this whole structure of debt on top of debt. Her voice went flat. It collapsed in spectacular fashion, took down 3 other businesses with it, ruined a lot of people. And then he ran. Boarded a ship to America before the authorities could arrest him, left us to face the consequences. Lucas was quiet, and Eleanor braced herself for the usual responses, pity or judgment or awkward platitudes. Instead, he asked, "Do you hate him?" The question surprised her. "I don't know, sometimes. Mostly, I'm just tired of thinking about him." That makes sense. Does it? Hate takes energy. You've got better things to spend yours on. Eleanor looked at him, really looked, and found something in his face that made her chest tight. Understanding, maybe. Or just the simple gift of not having to explain herself. "Why are you being nice to me?" she asked. "Is that what I'm doing?" "You know what I mean." "Maybe I'm just interested in someone who doesn't treat every conversation like a performance." "Everyone treats conversation like a performance." "You don't. Not with me, anyway." Before Eleanor could respond, voices carried up from the path below, women's laughter, sharp and carrying. Lucas tensed, and Eleanor followed his gaze to see Helena Ashford and Caroline Winters emerging from the woods, accompanied by a tall man in expensive riding clothes. Helena spotted them immediately, her eyes going wide with what looked like triumph. "Mr. Hale! What a surprise to find you here." She glanced at Eleanor, her smile razor-sharp. "And with Miss Vance, how cozy." Eleanor felt her face heat. They were sitting on a log in broad daylight, not remotely scandalous, but Helena's tone made it sound sordid. "Mrs. Ashford, Miss Winters." Lucas stood smoothly, offering no explanation or apology. "Lovely afternoon for a walk." "Indeed." Helena's gaze lingered on Eleanor's walking stick. "I'm surprised to see Miss Vance so far from Thornfield. Given her injury, I'd have thought she'd prefer to rest." "Dr. Morrison recommended walking," Eleanor said, keeping her voice level. "Fresh air aids recovery." "How progressive." Caroline's tone suggested she thought it was anything but. "Though perhaps a chaperone would have been wise. These woods can be quite isolated." "I'm perfectly safe." "I'm sure you believe that." Helena turned to Lucas. "Have you met Lord Pemberton? He's visiting from Yorkshire. Philip, this is Mr. Lucas Hale and Miss Eleanor Vance." The tall man stepped forward, and Eleanor recognized the type immediately. Titled, wealthy, and aware of both facts. He looked at Lucas with the kind of casual dominance that came from never being challenged. "Hale, I've heard of you. You're the one buying up tenant farms and modernizing production methods." Among other things, Lucas's tone was polite but cool. Interesting approach. Risky, though. Farmers don't adapt well to change. I've found they adapt better when they're partners rather than serfs. Pemberton's eyebrows rose. Radical notions. Effective ones. The tension crackled. Helena watched it all with barely concealed delight, and Eleanor suddenly understood. This wasn't an accidental meeting. They'd come here specifically because they'd heard Lucas was walking with her. "We should be getting back," Eleanor said, standing. Her ankle protested, but she ignored it. "Lady Catherine will be expecting me for tea." "Of course." Helena's smile was all teeth. "It was lovely seeing you both. I'm sure we'll all have much to discuss at the assembly." As they walked back toward Thornfield, Eleanor could feel Lucas's tension in the set of his shoulders. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to cause you trouble." You didn't cause anything. Helena's been looking for ammunition since her husband died and left her with more time than sense. Still, I know how this looks. Do you care how it looks? I care that it might reflect badly on Lady Catherine. She took us in. I won't repay that by giving people reasons to gossip. Lucas stopped walking, turning to face her. Is that really what you're worried about? Or are you worried what they'll say about you? The directness of it made her flinch. Both. Either. Does it matter? It matters if it means you're going to start avoiding me because of what small-minded people might whisper. I should avoid you. Probably. But will you? Eleanor wanted to say yes, wanted to be sensible and careful and all the things she was supposed to be. But standing there in the afternoon light, watching him watch her with those impossibly direct eyes, she found herself saying, no. Good. He started walking again. Because I wasn't planning on avoiding you either. They reached the edge of Thornfield's grounds in silence. Before they parted, Lucas touched her arm lightly. The assembly, will you dance with me? My ankle. Will be healed by then. Dr. Morrison said 2 weeks. The assembly is in 9 days. You counted. I pay attention. He waited. One dance, Eleanor. Let them talk. She should say no, should protect herself and her family and maintain whatever fragile position they'd managed to establish. But the defiance that had gotten her this far rose up like fire. Fine. One dance. His smile was quick and genuine. I'll hold you to that. He left her at the garden gate, and Eleanor watched him go before turning toward the house. Judith was at the window, her expression dark with disapproval. Their mother would hear about this within the hour, and then there would be tears and worry and warnings. But for the first time since arriving at Thornfield, Eleanor didn't care. She'd spent months being careful, being grateful, being exactly what everyone expected. And where had it gotten her? Still ruined, still dependent, still trapped. Maybe it was time to stop playing by rules that had never protected her anyway. She climbed the stairs to her room, her ankle aching, her heart racing, and thought about Lucas's challenge. Let them talk, as if it were that simple, as if reputation didn't matter when you had nothing else. But maybe that was the point. When you had nothing left to lose, you could afford to be brave. The walking stick felt solid in her hand, perfectly weighted, a gift from someone who'd seen her at her worst and helped anyway, who challenged her instead of pitying her, who made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she was more than her father's shame. Eleanor set it carefully against the wall and looked out the window toward the distant woods. 9 days until the assembly. 9 days to decide if she was really brave enough to face them all. Somewhere below, she heard Judith's sharp voice rising in argument, their mother's tearful response. The familiar sounds of their family slowly fracturing under the weight of survival. Eleanor pressed her forehead against the cool glass and made her choice. She would go to the assembly, she would dance with Lucas Hale, and she would show every single person who'd come to gawk at the ruined Vances that she was still standing. Let them talk indeed. The 9 days passed like a fever dream. Eleanor's ankle healed faster than expected, though she kept using the walking stick because it felt like armor, something solid to lean on when the ground beneath her kept shifting. Lady Catherine said nothing about the encounter in the woods, but her silence felt loaded. She watched Eleanor at meals with an expression that might have been concern or calculation, and twice Eleanor caught her in what looked like heated discussion with Mrs. Fairweather, their voices dropping to whispers when she entered the room. Judith's Cold War intensified. She moved through the house like a ghost, speaking only when absolutely necessary, her disapproval radiating like heat from a forge. Beatrice tried to play mediator, flitting between them with anxious chatter that satisfied no one. Their mother deteriorated. Dr. Morrison came 3 times in 1 week, his expression growing grimmer with each visit. He prescribed tonics and rest and fresh air, but they all knew the real diagnosis. She was giving up, letting go of whatever thread had kept her fighting through their father's disgrace and their subsequent exile. She needs a reason to get better, Dr. Morrison told Eleanor on the 3rd visit. Something to live for beyond just survival. Eleanor had wanted to laugh. What reason could she possibly give? Their prospects were non-existent, their reputation destroyed, their future a blank wall they kept walking into, hoping for a door that wasn't there. But she'd nodded and thanked him and added, "Find Mother a reason to live," to the impossible list of things she was supposed to accomplish. The day of the assembly arrived with cold rain that lasted through the afternoon before breaking into a damp, heavy evening. Eleanor stood in her room, staring at the dress Beatrice had altered for her, a dark blue silk that had been their mother's, taken in and modernized as much as their limited skills allowed. It was beautiful in a subdued way, appropriate for a woman in their position, grateful but not presumptuous, visible but not showy. Eleanor hated it. "You look lovely," Beatrice said from the doorway. She wore pale yellow that made her seem younger than 16, her hair curled with papers and her eyes bright with nervous excitement. "Truly, the blue brings out your eyes. I look like someone trying very hard not to be noticed. Isn't that the point?" Eleanor turned from the mirror. "Is it? I thought the point was to show them we're not broken. We can do both, not be noticed and not be broken." "I don't think it works that way." Beatrice came in and sat on the bed, her expression turning serious in a way that made her look suddenly older. "Judith told me about the man in the woods, Lucas Hale." "Did she?" "She said you're being reckless, that you're going to ruin what little chance we have left." Eleanor's hands tightened on the walking stick. "And what do you think?" "I think Judith is scared. I think we're all scared. But I also think—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "I think you're the only one of us who's still fighting. Mother's given up. Judith's just trying to survive. But you're actually trying to live." The observation landed like a punch. Eleanor sat down next to her sister, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know if that's brave or stupid. Maybe it's both. Maybe brave things usually are." Beatrice took her hand. "Just be careful. Please, I can't lose you too." They sat in silence until Judith appeared, already dressed in a muted gray that made her look like she was attending a funeral. "The carriage is ready. We should go before Lady Catherine changes her mind about lending it to us." The ride to the assembly was tense and quiet. Judith stared out the window, her jaw tight. Beatrice fidgeted with her gloves. Eleanor focused on breathing steadily, trying to prepare herself for what was coming. The assembly was being held at Millbrook Manor, Helena Ashford's estate. The house was ablaze with light, carriages lined up along the drive, disgorging passengers in evening dress. Eleanor watched them through the window, confident, laughing, belonging, everything she and her sisters were not. "Remember," Judith said as they approached the entrance, "we're grateful guests. We smile, we're polite, and we do not make scenes." "I know how to behave, Judith." "Do you? Because lately I'm not sure." They climbed out before Eleanor could respond, joining the flow of people entering the house. The entrance hall was grand in the way that old money always was, understated but expensive, every detail proclaiming wealth without shouting it. Helena greeted them at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The Mrs. Vance, how lovely you could attend, and Miss Eleanor, I see your ankle has recovered. How fortunate." "Quite." Eleanor kept her voice neutral. "The dancing has already begun. I'm sure you'll find many eager partners." Helena's gaze swept over their dresses, and Eleanor saw the assessment. Good fabric but outdated style. Expensive once but clearly remade. "Do enjoy yourselves." They were dismissed. Caroline Winters materialized to lead Beatrice toward a group of young people, and Judith was immediately claimed by an older woman who wanted to discuss charitable works. Eleanor found herself alone in a room full of strangers, all of whom seemed to be looking at her. She made her way to the wall, trying to look purposeful rather than abandoned. The assembly room was beautiful. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers, musicians on a dais at one end. Couples moved through dances with practiced ease, their movements speaking of lessons and practice and lives that had never been interrupted by scandal. "You came." Eleanor turned to find Lucas beside her, and something in her chest loosened. He was dressed formally, dark coat, crisp cravat, the kind of understated elegance that made other men's finery look desperate. But it was his expression that caught her, pleased and something else. Relieved, maybe. "I said I would." "You did. I wasn't sure you'd go through with it." "Neither was I." He offered his arm. Dance with me now, before you lose your nerve. That's not very flattering. It's honest. Come on. They moved onto the floor as a new dance began. A waltz, which meant close proximity and far too much opportunity for conversation. Lucas took her hand, his other hand settling at her waist, and suddenly the room felt too warm. "You're nervous," he said. "I'm not. Your pulse is racing. I can see it at your throat." That's... She stopped, flustered. "You shouldn't be looking at my throat." "Why not? It's a very nice throat." Despite everything, Eleanor felt a laugh escape. "You're terrible at this." "At what?" "Propriety, social graces, everything that's supposed to happen at these things. I never claimed to be good at it." He spun her smoothly through a turn. "I'm much better at other things." "Like what?" "Like noticing when you're about to bolt. Like knowing you're terrified right now but refusing to show it. Like being absolutely certain that half the people in this room are watching us and trying to figure out what disaster they can make of it." Eleanor glanced around and realized he was right. Helena stood with a cluster of women, their heads bent together in obvious gossip. Lord Pemberton watched from near the refreshments, his expression speculative. Even Lady Catherine, standing with a group of older matrons, had her attention fixed on them. "This was a mistake," Eleanor said. "I shouldn't have—" "Stop." Lucas's grip on her hand tightened slightly. "Don't give them what they want." "What do they want?" "To see you fail. To confirm everything they've already decided about you." His eyes were hard now, focused. "Dance with me, Eleanor. Let them watch, let them talk, and show them you don't care." "But I do care." "Then pretend you don't. Fake it until it's true." The music swelled around them, and Eleanor forced herself to breathe, to move with him instead of against him, to stop thinking about all the eyes tracking their movement and just exist in this moment, dancing with a man who'd helped her when he didn't have to, who challenged her instead of coddling her, who made her feel like maybe she was worth the trouble. "There," Lucas said quietly. "That's better." "How do you know?" "Because you stopped looking like you wanted to run and started looking like you wanted to fight." The dance ended too soon. Lucas led her off the floor, and immediately they were surrounded. Helena appeared with Caroline and two other women Eleanor didn't recognize, their smiles sharp. "Mr. Hale, you must introduce us properly to your partner, though I suppose we've all heard of the Vances by now. Mrs. Ashford, ladies." Lucas's tone was polite but cool. "I believe you met Miss Eleanor Vance at Thornfield." "Indeed, such a tragedy about her father. These financial scandals are always so sordid." This from one of the unknown women, her voice carrying deliberately. "One wonders how families recover from such disgrace." Eleanor felt the trap closing. She could be demure and grateful, confirming their assumptions about her reduced state, or she could fight back and prove she was exactly the upstart they suspected. Either way, she lost. "Recovery is often a matter of perspective," she said carefully. "What looks like disgrace to some might be freedom to others." Helena's eyebrows rose. "Freedom? How very modern." "Practical, rather. When you've lost everything, you learn what actually matters." "And what matters to you, Miss Vance?" "Survival. Security for my family. The ability to determine my own future instead of having it determined by other people's judgments." The silence that followed was loaded. Caroline looked scandalized. Helena's smile was triumphant. The other women exchanged glances that spoke volumes. "How very ambitious," Helena said finally, "though I wonder if you're quite realistic about what futures are available to young women in your position." Before Eleanor could respond, Lucas spoke. "Miss Vance strikes me as extraordinarily realistic, more so than most people I've met." "Oh, I'm sure she's very clever." Helena's tone made it sound like an insult. "But cleverness without proper guidance can lead to unfortunate decisions." "Such as?" Lucas's voice had gone dangerously quiet. Helena's smile was all innocence. "Such as accepting invitations one cannot properly return, or encouraging attentions from gentlemen above one's station, or generally behaving as if reduced circumstances don't require increased discretion." The meaning was crystal clear. Eleanor was overreaching, presuming, forgetting her place. Eleanor felt something cold settle in her stomach. This was it, the moment where she either accepted the judgment or destroyed whatever fragile position they'd managed to build. Every instinct screamed at her to back down, apologize, retreat. But the thought of Lucas hearing her grovel made something in her snap. "You're right," she said clearly. "I should be more careful about accepting invitations from people who invite me only to remind me I don't belong. How thoughtless of me not to recognize hostile charity when it's offered." Helena's face flushed. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "I think you know exactly what I mean. You invited us here to watch us struggle, to confirm that the disgraced Vances are exactly as pathetic as you hoped. Well, congratulations. Mission accomplished." "Eleanor," Lucas started. She pulled away from him, her heart racing. "Excuse me, I need air." She made it to the terrace before the shaking started. The night air was cold and damp, smelling of rain and earth. Behind her, she could hear the music continuing, the dance going on without her, and she wanted to scream. Footsteps approached. She expected Lucas, but it was Judith who appeared, her face pale with fury. "What did you do?" "Nothing that wasn't coming anyway. You just insulted our hostess in front of half the county. We're ruined, again, because you couldn't keep your mouth shut and accept that we don't get to have pride anymore." The words hit like stones. Eleanor turned to face her sister. "Is that what you want? To spend the rest of our lives being grateful for scraps and accepting abuse with a smile?" "I want to survive. I want a roof over our heads and food on the table and maybe, eventually, some tiny chance at a normal life. But you keep—" Judith's voice broke. "You keep fighting battles we can't win, and every time you do, you drag us down with you. I'm trying to protect us. By making enemies of everyone who might help us, by throwing our situation in their faces instead of apologizing for it. That's not protection, Eleanor. That's suicide." Before Eleanor could respond, Beatrice appeared in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "They're saying horrible things about Father, about us, about Eleanor. Mrs. Ashford is telling everyone that we're social climbers trying to trap wealthy men." "Of course she is." Eleanor's laugh was bitter. "Because heaven forbid we exist without being properly ashamed." "This isn't funny." Beatrice's voice rose. "Lord Pemberton just told his friends that he'd heard Father's debts included gambling houses and mistresses. He's making it sound like Father was some kind of monster." Eleanor felt ice flood her veins. "What?" "He said he had it on good authority. That the business failures were just the surface, that there were other things, worse things." "That's not true. Father was a fool and a coward, but he wasn't—" Eleanor stopped, suddenly unsure. How much did she really know about what their father had done? About where the money had gone? Judith's face had gone white. "If those rumors spread, we're finished. No one will receive us. Lady Catherine will have to turn us out to protect her own reputation." "We need to leave," Beatrice said. "Now. Before it gets worse." But it was already worse. Caroline Winters appeared on the terrace, her expression a mix of fake sympathy and real satisfaction. "Miss Vance, I think you should know, Lord Pemberton is asking Lady Catherine about your father's whereabouts. He seems very interested in whether the authorities are still pursuing him." The implication was clear. If their father was a wanted criminal, they might be implicated. At minimum, they were harboring knowledge of his location. "My father left for America," Eleanor said, her voice hard. "We have no contact with him and no knowledge of his current situation." "Of course. But you understand how it looks. A man fleeing justice, his family accepting charity from a distant relative." Caroline let the sentence hang. "What are you suggesting?" "Nothing. Merely observing that associations can be dangerous. Lady Catherine is such a respectable woman. It would be unfortunate if her generosity were to be repaid with scandal." It was a threat, clear and unmistakable. Leave voluntarily or be forced out in a way that would destroy Lady Catherine's standing along with theirs. Eleanor looked at her sisters. Beatrice was crying openly now. Judith's face was a mask of barely controlled panic. And somewhere inside, their mother lay in bed, too weak to weather another disaster. She was trapped. Completely, utterly trapped. "Eleanor," Lucas's voice cut through the chaos. He stood in the doorway, and his expression was thunderous. "Come inside." I don't think Singh. Now. She'd never heard him use that tone before. She followed him back into the assembly room, aware of every eye tracking their movement. He led her straight to where Lady Catherine stood with Lord Pemberton and Helena, their conversation stopping abruptly at their approach. Lady Catherine, Lucas said, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Has there? Lady Catherine's voice was ice. Lord Pemberton seems to be spreading information about the Vances that is both unverified and deeply inappropriate. Pemberton's smile was lazy. I merely repeated what I heard from reliable sources in London. If the information is uncomfortable, perhaps that's because it's true. And your sources are? Gentlemen's clubs, business associates, people who knew Richard Vance before his spectacular fall. Pemberton's gaze found Eleanor, including several who claim he owed them significant sums, money that mysteriously disappeared. My father's debts are a matter of public record, Eleanor said, forcing her voice steady. There was a full accounting. Everything he owed was documented. The official accounting, perhaps, but there are always irregularities. Money that changes hands outside proper channels. Obligations that don't appear in ledgers. He was implying her father had been involved in something criminal beyond the fraud. Something darker. And whether it was true or not didn't matter. The accusation alone would destroy them. This is speculation, Lucas said sharply. Gossip dressed up as fact. Is it? Helena stepped forward, her expression sympathetic in a way that made Eleanor's skin crawl. I've heard similar things. It's all over London, apparently. The Vance scandal goes much deeper than simple business failure. Then perhaps, Lady Catherine said quietly, we should discuss this privately. There's no need to air such matters in public. Oh, but I think there is. Pemberton's smile widened. Transparency is so important, don't you think? Particularly when it comes to who we allow into our homes and our society. We have a responsibility to each other, after all. Eleanor understood then. This wasn't about her father. It was about power, about putting her and her family in their place, about ensuring that anyone who tried to rise above their assigned station knew the cost. She looked at Lucas and saw fury in his eyes. At Lady Catherine and saw calculation. At her sisters and saw fear. And she made a choice. You want to know the truth? Eleanor's voice cut through the room. Fine. My father was a gambler and a coward who destroyed his business and abandoned his family. We have no money, no prospects, and we're living on charity. That's the truth. It's humiliating and it's painful, and it's exactly what you all came here hoping to confirm. The room had gone utterly silent. But here's what else is true. We're here because we're trying to survive, not seduce wealthy men or climb social ladders or whatever other crimes you've decided we're guilty of. Just survive. And if that makes us dangerous or scandalous or whatever you need us to be to feel superior, then fine. Think what you want. But don't pretend you're protecting society. You're just protecting your own comfort. Helena's face had gone purple. How dare you? What? Tell the truth? I thought you wanted transparency. You insolent. That's enough. Lady Catherine's voice cracked like a whip. Eleanor, Judith, Beatrice, you're leaving now. It was banishment, clear and final. Eleanor felt something crack in her chest, but she refused to show it. She turned to go, then stopped. Lucas, I'm sorry. You tried to help, and I... Don't apologize to him, Pemberton cut in smoothly. I'm sure Mr. Hale understands that some associations are too compromising to maintain. Don't you, Hale? Lucas didn't answer. He was staring at Pemberton with an expression Eleanor couldn't read. Actually, he said slowly, there's something you all should know about who I am. Eleanor frowned. What are you talking about? Lucas turned to face the room, and his entire bearing changed. The easy confidence she knew hardened into something else. Authority, command, the kind of presence that made people instinctively straighten. My full name is Lucas Hale Pemberton Ashford. I'm the Viscount Thornborough, heir to the Earl of Northridge. I own approximately 15,000 acres across 3 counties, including most of the land you're currently standing on. The silence that followed was absolute. Eleanor felt the world tilt. What? Helena, Lucas's voice was cold, Millbrook Manor is mine. You've been managing it as my tenant since your husband died. That arrangement can change." Helena had gone white. "Lord Pemberton," Lucas turned to the other man. "We're cousins, though distantly. I believe your father still owes mine rather a lot of money from a failed shipping venture. Shall we discuss that publicly, since we're being transparent?" Pemberton's smile had vanished. "As for the rest of you," Lucas's gaze swept the room. "I've been listening to gossip and innuendo and outright lies about the Vance family for the better part of an hour. If I hear another word of it, you'll all discover exactly how much power a Viscount can wield when he's genuinely angry." He turned back to Eleanor, and his expression shifted, something raw and almost vulnerable breaking through the aristocratic mask. "I'm sorry, I should have told you earlier. I was being a coward." Eleanor couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The man she'd been arguing with, walking with, slowly trusting, was one of them. The powerful, titled elite who destroyed her father and abandoned her family. "You lied to me." "I withheld information. It's not the same." "Isn't it?" Her voice broke. "You let me believe you were someone safe, someone who wouldn't—" She stopped, unable to finish. "Eleanor, please." "No!" She backed away, everything inside her screaming. "You're exactly like all of them, playing games with people's lives because you can." She turned and fled, ignoring Lucas calling her name, ignoring her sister's shocked faces, ignoring everything except the need to get out, to escape, to run before she completely shattered. She made it to the entrance hall before she realized she had no way to leave. Their carriage was gone, sent away to return later. She was trapped in a house full of people who hated her, having just publicly destroyed any chance at survival. The front door opened and a servant rushed in, rain-soaked and gasping. "My lord, there's been an accident on the North Road, a carriage overturned near the bridge." Lady Catherine appeared. "Whose carriage?" "Don't know, ma'am, but there's a young lady. They say she's badly hurt." Eleanor's blood went cold. What did she look like? Fair hair, young, maybe 16. She was thrown from the carriage when it went over. "Beatrice." Eleanor's whisper was barely audible. But Beatrice was right there, standing with Judith near the assembly room door, which meant, "The other girl," the servant continued, "the one still inside the carriage. She was calling for her sister, kept saying, 'Tell Eleanor,' over and over." Understanding hit like lightning. Not Beatrice. The other person who might have taken their carriage, who might have been desperate enough to run. Their mother. Eleanor was running before she'd made a conscious decision, out the door into the rain, toward the North Road and whatever disaster waited there. Behind her, she heard shouting, Lucas's voice, Lady Catherine's sharp commands, the sudden chaos of the assembly breaking apart. But all she could think was that she'd been inside arguing and posturing while her mother, her sick, fragile mother, had tried to leave alone. And now she might be dying in an overturned carriage on a dark road, and it was entirely Eleanor's fault. The rain hit Eleanor like a physical blow, cold and driving, soaking through her dress within seconds. She didn't care. Her feet slipped on the wet gravel of the drive, but she kept running, her breath coming in ragged gasps that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with the terror clawing at her throat. The North Road. 1/2 mile, maybe more. In the dark. In the rain. She'd barely made it past the first curve when hoofbeats thundered behind her. A horse drew alongside, and Lucas leaned down, his face barely visible in the darkness. "Get on. Go away. Eleanor, don't be us. I said go away." She kept running, her sodden skirts heavy and clinging. "You've done enough." He maneuvered the horse in front of her, blocking her path. "Your mother is hurt. You can hate me later. Right now, get on the damn horse." The practicality of it cut through her panic. She grabbed his outstretched hand and let him haul her up behind him. The moment she was seated, he spurred the horse forward, and they plunged into the darkness at a speed that would have been reckless in daylight. Eleanor clung to him because she had no choice, her arms around his waist, her face pressed against his back. He was as soaked as she was, rain streaming off his coat, but he was solid and warm, and she hated that it made her feel safer. "I'm sorry," he said over the sound of rain and hoofbeats. "I should have told you." "Not now." "When then? Because you're going to run the moment this is over, and I—" "Lucas, please, I can't—" Her voice broke. "Not now." He fell silent, and they rode hard into the storm. They found the carriage a quarter-mile past the bridge, tilted at a sickening angle in the ditch beside the road. One wheel had completely shattered, and the whole structure looked ready to collapse. A small group of people with lanterns stood around it. Locals, probably, drawn by the accident. One of them was trying to calm the horses, which were still in their traces and screaming with terror. Lucas pulled up and dismounted in one smooth motion, then helped Eleanor down. She hit the ground running, splashing through mud toward the wreckage. "Mother! Miss, don't—" One of the men tried to stop her, but she shoved past him. The carriage door hung open at an odd angle. Inside, barely visible in the lantern light, Eleanor could see her mother crumpled against the far side, her dress torn and dark with what might have been blood or just mud. Her eyes were closed, her face paper white. "Mother." Eleanor tried to climb in, but the carriage lurched, settling deeper into the mud. Someone grabbed her waist and pulled her back. "It's not stable," Lucas said in her ear. "If you go in there, you could bring the whole thing down on top of her." "Then what do we do?" Eleanor twisted in his grip, desperate. "We can't just leave her in there." "We won't." He turned to the gathered men. "I need ropes, strong ones, and at least 4 of you willing to help pull this carriage upright." "My lord?" One of the older men stepped forward, squinting through the rain. "Is that you, Lord Thornborough?" "Yes. The woman inside is Mrs. Vance, a guest of Lady Catherine. I need her extracted safely, and I need it done now." The men moved immediately, respect and fear of his title motivating them faster than any amount of pleading could have. Within minutes, they'd produced ropes from somewhere and were tying them to the carriage frame, debating the best angle to pull from. Eleanor stood helpless, watching, her whole body shaking from cold and fear and rage. Lucas appeared beside her with his coat, draping it over her shoulders. "Don't," she said, "you're freezing. I don't want your coat. I don't want your help. I don't want anything from you." "Too bad. You're getting it anyway." He didn't move away. "Eleanor, I know you're angry." "Angry?" She laughed, the sound harsh. "I'm not angry, Lucas. I'm done. Done trusting people who lie to me. Done believing anyone actually wants to help instead of just wanting to feel superior." "Is that what you think I was doing?" "What else could it be? The wealthy lord playing at being common, amusing himself with the disgraced family. Did it make you feel good? Being the one with all the power for once?" His jaw tightened. "You know that's not—" "Ready!" one of the men called out. "On 3, we pull." They heaved in unison, muscles straining against the weight of the carriage. It groaned, shifted slightly, then settled back. Inside, Eleanor's mother made a sound, weak and pained. "Again," Lucas barked. "Put your backs into it." This time the carriage moved more, the angle changing enough that Eleanor could see her mother's face clearly. Her eyes were open now, unfocused and glazed. "Eleanor?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here, Mother. We're going to get you out." "I'm sorry, I had to leave. I couldn't stay and watch them destroy you too." Eleanor felt tears mix with rain on her face. "Don't talk. Save your strength." "One more pull should do it," Lucas said. "Everyone ready?" They pulled again, and this time the carriage shifted dramatically, the weight redistributing as it started to right itself. But the movement was too sudden, too violent. Eleanor heard the crack of breaking wood, saw the whole structure start to collapse inward. She didn't think. She threw herself toward the carriage, reaching through the tilted doorway for her mother's outstretched hand. Her fingers closed around her mother's wrist, just as the roof beam gave way. And then Lucas was there, one arm around Eleanor's waist, the other reaching past her to grab her mother under the arms. He pulled them both out in one wrenching motion, stumbling backward as the carriage finally gave up and collapsed completely behind them. They landed in a heap in the mud, Eleanor on top of Lucas with her mother half draped across her. For a moment nobody moved. Then her mother coughed, a wet, painful sound, and Eleanor scrambled to turn her over. "Mother, can you hear me?" "Eleanor." Her mother's hand found Eleanor's face, surprisingly strong. "My stubborn girl, always fighting." "Dr. Morrison is coming," Lucas said, getting to his feet. "I sent someone from the assembly. He should be here soon." Eleanor's mother looked past Eleanor to Lucas, and something changed in her expression. "You're the one she talks about." "Mother, don't. The one who makes her angry, who makes her hope." Her mother's breathing was labored. Take care of her. She won't take care of herself. I'm not dying, Eleanor said fiercely. And you're not either. So stop talking like this is goodbye. But when Dr. Morrison arrived 10 minutes later in a carriage driven at breakneck speed, his expression after examining her mother was grave. We need to get her somewhere warm and dry immediately. She's badly injured, ribs, possibly her back, and she's burning with fever. Thornfield is closest, Lucas said. No. Eleanor's voice was sharp. Lady Catherine won't. She will if I tell her to. Lucas's tone brooked no argument. Your mother needs care now, not after we've debated politics and propriety. Dr. Morrison, can she be moved? Carefully. Very carefully. They improvised a stretcher from broken carriage planks and Lucas's coat. 6 men carrying her mother as gently as possible, while Eleanor walked alongside, holding her mother's hand. The rain had lessened to a drizzle, but the damage was done. They were all soaked through, covered in mud, Eleanor's dress torn beyond repair. Lady Catherine met them at Thornfield's entrance, her face unreadable. Behind her, Helena and Caroline and half the assembly guests crowded into the doorway, gawking. Lady Catherine, Lucas said, Mrs. Vance needs immediate care. I'm asking you to receive her. Lady Catherine looked at Eleanor's mother's unconscious form, then at Eleanor standing bedraggled and defiant in the rain. For a long moment, no one breathed. Mrs. Fairweather, Lady Catherine said finally, prepare the best guest room, send for extra linens and hot water, and clear everyone out of this house who doesn't live here or have actual business to attend to. Lady Catherine, surely you can't, Helena started. I can, and I will. This is my house, Helena. I suggest you remember that. She turned to Lucas. Help them get her inside. Carefully. They carried Eleanor's mother up to a room Eleanor had never seen before, larger than their suite, with a proper fireplace already being lit by a maid. Doctor. Morrison took over immediately, barking orders for supplies while he cut away her mother's sodden dress to examine the injuries. Eleanor stood in the corner, dripping muddy water onto expensive carpet, and watched. Beatrice and Judith arrived, equally soaked. They'd apparently run from the assembly on foot. Beatrice immediately burst into tears. Judith went white and silent. Girls, out, Dr. Morrison said without looking up. I need space to work. I'm staying, Eleanor said. Eleanor, I'm staying. Lucas appeared beside her, his presence solid. Let her stay. She needs to see. Dr. Morrison sighed but didn't argue further. For the next hour, Eleanor watched him work, setting ribs, stitching a gash on her mother's temple, forcing some kind of tonic between her lips. Her mother drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes crying out in pain, sometimes eerily still. Finally, Dr. Morrison straightened, wiping blood from his hands. She's stable, for now, but she's very weak and the fever is concerning. The next few days will be critical. Will she live? Eleanor's voice sounded foreign to her own ears. I don't know. I'm sorry, but I simply don't know. She's been unwell for months, and this trauma on top of that, he trailed off. Stay with her. Keep her warm. Get fluids in her when she wakes. I'll return in the morning. After he left, Eleanor sank into the chair beside the bed. Her mother's breathing was shallow but steady, her face peaceful in sleep or unconsciousness. Eleanor couldn't tell which. You should change, Lucas said quietly. You're shivering. I'm fine. You're going to get sick. Then I get sick. She looked at him directly for the first time since the revelation. Why are you still here? Where else would I be? Anywhere but near me. Your secret's out now. Everyone knows you're a Viscount. You don't have to pretend to care about the disgraced family anymore. He pulled up another chair and sat down, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him despite their wet clothes. I wasn't pretending. Weren't you? The whole time we walked together, you let me think you were someone you're not. I let you think I was someone I wished I was. His voice was rough. Do you know what it's like to have every conversation filtered through what you own or who your family is? To never know of people like you or your title? No, I don't know that. I know what it's like to have every conversation filtered through what you've lost and who your family was. To know for certain that people hate you because of your name. I know, and I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but Eleanor, everything else was real. Every argument, every conversation, the way I... He stopped. None of that was a lie. Eleanor wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly it physically hurt. But trust was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. It doesn't matter now, she said tiredly. Real or not, it's over. You're a Viscount. I'm the daughter of a criminal. Those aren't compatible realities. They could be. No, they can't. You saw what happened tonight. Your own cousin was spreading poison about my family. Your tenant was trying to get us thrown out. What do you think will happen if you're actually associated with us? Your reputation will suffer. Your family will be furious. And for what? For me? Yes. The simple certainty of it cracked something in her chest. Why? Because you're the first person in years who's talked to me like I'm a human being instead of a title. Because you argue with me and challenge me and refuse to be impressed by things that don't matter. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be real instead of performing. Eleanor closed her eyes against the tears threatening to spill over. Lucas, that's not enough. Feeling real isn't worth destroying your life over. Let me decide what my life is worth. Before she could respond, her mother stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Eleanor? Eleanor was at her side immediately, taking her hand. I'm here. The assembly. Did I ruin everything? You didn't ruin anything. You're going to be fine. Her mother's gaze drifted to Lucas. You're still here? Yes, ma'am. Good. Her eyes closed again. Someone needs to make sure she doesn't do anything stupid. Too late for that, Eleanor muttered. Lady Catherine appeared in the doorway, changed into dry clothes, her expression thoughtful. Lucas? A word. He followed her out into the hallway, and Eleanor strained to hear their low conversation. That was quite a performance tonight, Lady Catherine said. It wasn't a performance. No? Announcing your title in the middle of a social gathering, threatening half the assembled guests, then riding off into a storm to rescue a woman you barely know. I know her well enough. Do you? Or do you just know that she's different from the usual insipid girls who fawn over your rank? There was a pause. Then Lucas said quietly, She's the first person who's made me want to be better. Not richer or more powerful, better. And if that's not enough reason to help her, then I don't know what is. Lady Catherine was silent for a long moment. Her family is ruined, Lucas. Destroyed beyond repair. Associating with them will cost you. I know. Your father will be furious. He has plans for you, a suitable match, a political alliance, all the usual nonsense. My father's plans have never included what I actually want. And what do you want? Another pause, longer this time. I want to prove that who you are matters more than where you come from, that people can rebuild after being destroyed, that mercy is possible even when it's not convenient. That's very noble, also very naive. Maybe, but I'm doing it anyway. Eleanor heard footsteps, Lady Catherine returning to her own rooms. Lucas came back into the bedroom, his expression unreadable. What did she say? Eleanor asked. That I'm being naive and it's going to cost me. She's right. Probably. He sat down again. I'm staying anyway. Why? Because you need help, and I have the resources to provide it. Because your family deserves better than what they've gotten. And because, he met her eyes directly, because I care what happens to you. All of you. Eleanor wanted to argue, but exhaustion was setting in, the adrenaline draining away and leaving her hollow. She looked at her mother's pale face, thought about Beatrice and Judith waiting downstairs, about the impossible mess they were all in. What do we do now? She asked quietly. Now, you get some rest. I'll sit with your mother. You don't have to. I want to. Go, Eleanor. You're no use to anyone if you collapse. She wanted to protest, but her body was already shutting down. She stood on shaking legs, swayed, and Lucas caught her elbow. Easy. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. He guided her toward the door. There are dry clothes in your room. Change, sleep for a few hours, then come back if you want. I promise I'll wake you if anything changes. Eleanor looked at him, really looked, and saw exhaustion in his face too, and worry. and something else she couldn't quite name. He'd threatened his own cousin for her, had ridden into a storm, had held her in the mud while her whole world came apart. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe it hadn't all been lies. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome." She made it to her room before the tears came, great racking sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for her mother, for her father's betrayal, for the impossible situation they were all trapped in. She cried for the girl she'd been before everything fell apart, and for the woman she was becoming, harder, sharper, someone who couldn't afford to trust or hope or believe in anything good. But mostly she cried because Lucas had offered her exactly that, trust and hope, and the possibility that someone might actually care. And she was too terrified to accept it. When the tears finally stopped, she changed mechanically into dry clothes and lay down on the bed. Sleep pulled at her, but her mind kept spinning. The assembly, the accusations, the carriage accident, Lucas's revelation. It was too much. All of it was too much. She must have dozed because when she woke, pale dawn light was filtering through the windows. She was up immediately, not bothering with shoes as she ran back to her mother's room. Lucas was still there, slumped in the chair beside the bed, his eyes closed. Her mother looked the same, pale and still, but breathing. The fire had burned down to embers. Eleanor crossed to rebuild it, trying to be quiet, but Lucas's eyes opened at the sound. "Any change?" she asked. She woke once, around 3, asked for water, drank a little, then went back to sleep. He sat up, wincing. "Dr. Morrison came by an hour ago, said the fever's holding steady, which is good. You should have woken me. You needed sleep more than you needed another crisis." Eleanor finished with the fire and turned to face him. In the gray morning light, he looked exhausted and rumpled and entirely unlike a viscount, just a man who'd stayed up all night watching over a sick woman he barely knew. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. "And don't give me speeches about being real or wanting to help. I want the truth." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, his gaze on her mother's sleeping form. "My mother died when I was 12. Fever, like this. My father was away on business, and I was at school. By the time anyone sent for me, it was over. I never got to say goodbye." The admission landed like a stone in water, ripples spreading out. "Lucas, I know what it's like to watch someone you love slip away while you're powerless to stop it. I wouldn't wish that on anyone." He looked at her. "So yes, I'm helping, not because I want something from you, not because I'm playing games, because I have the power to make this slightly less terrible, and using power for something good seems like a novel concept." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me, just let me help. Stop fighting me on it." Before she could respond, voices rose from downstairs, angry, male, getting louder. Lucas stood immediately, moving to the door. "Stay here." "Like hell." They made it to the landing in time to see Lady Catherine facing down 3 men in the entrance hall. Lord Pemberton, another older man Eleanor didn't recognize, and a third who wore the severe black of a lawyer or magistrate. "I don't care what authority you claim," Lady Catherine was saying, her voice ice. "This is my home, and you will not barge in making demands." "We have questions about the Vance family," Pemberton said. "Questions that won't wait." "Then make an appointment like civilized people." "This isn't a social call, Lady Catherine. It's an investigation." Eleanor's blood went cold. Investigation. That meant official. That meant the authorities were involved. Lucas descended the stairs, his whole bearing transformed. This was the Viscount now, not the man she'd walked with in the fields. "Gentlemen, I wasn't aware we were expecting visitors." "Lord Thornborough." The older man inclined his head. "We meet at last. I'm your father's solicitor, Mr. Graves. This is Magistrate Whitmore. We've come regarding the Vance matter." "What matter would that be?" "Harboring a fugitive's family, possibly conspiring to hide his whereabouts. At minimum, impeding justice." Eleanor felt the floor tilt. Judith appeared on the landing above, her face stricken. Beatrice was crying. "That's absurd," Lucas said flatly. "The Vances have done nothing wrong." Perhaps not. But we have reports that Mrs. Vance attempted to flee last night, presumably to join her husband. That suggests guilty knowledge." She attempted to leave because she was being harassed, Eleanor said, moving down the stairs, by people who thought it was entertaining to destroy what little we had left. Whitmore's gaze found her. Miss Eleanor Vance? Yes. We have questions for you about your father's whereabouts, about his associates, about certain financial transactions that occurred before he left England. I know nothing about any of that. We'll determine what you know. His smile was cold. There's also the matter of the carriage accident. Very convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Just as we were preparing to question your family? Eleanor's hands clenched. Are you suggesting my mother threw herself from a carriage to avoid answering questions? I'm suggesting that the timing is suspicious, as is Lord Thornborough's sudden involvement. One might wonder what interest a viscount has in protecting a criminal's family. One might mind their own business, Lucas said, his voice dangerous. This is official business, my lord. We have reason to believe Richard Vance didn't act alone, that there were others involved in the fraud, possibly including family members. The accusation hung in the air like poison. Eleanor felt everything she'd fought for crumbling. They weren't just social pariahs now, they were suspected criminals. You have no proof of that, Lady Catherine said sharply. We have enough to ask questions, and if those questions aren't answered satisfactorily, we have enough to take the Vance women into custody pending further investigation. On what grounds? Lucas demanded. Obstruction. Conspiracy. The list is longer than you might think. Whitmore pulled a document from his coat. This is a warrant to search Mrs. Vance's belongings and question all three daughters, separately. Eleanor's mind raced. If they searched their mother's things, what would they find? Letters from their father. Evidence of where he'd gone. Her mother had been so careful, burning everything, but what if she'd missed something? And separate questioning meant they'd try to get the sisters to contradict each other, to trip them up, to find any crack they could exploit. My mother is gravely ill, Eleanor said, forcing her voice steady. She nearly died last night. Dr. Morrison will confirm she's in no state to be questioned. We'll start with you then, and your sisters. No. Lucas moved to stand beside Eleanor. You will not question anyone until they have legal representation, and you certainly won't do it under my roof without proper cause. Your roof? Pemberton smiled unpleasantly. I thought this was Lady Catherine's house. It is, which I own, making it my roof. Lucas's tone could have cut glass. Gentlemen, you've stated your business. Now I suggest you leave before I have you removed. You can't. I absolutely can. You have a warrant to search and question. You don't have permission to remain on my property beyond what's necessary to execute that warrant. Since Mrs. Vance is too ill to be questioned and I've denied you access to her daughters without counsel present, there's nothing for you to execute, so leave. Whitmore's face reddened. This is obstruction. This is me exercising my rights as a property owner. Take it up with a judge if you have a problem. Lucas crossed his arms. Until then, I suggest you remember who you're threatening. The men exchanged glances. Pemberton looked furious. Graves appeared calculating. Whitmore was clearly debating whether to push. Very well, Whitmore said finally. But this isn't over. We'll return with a more specific warrant. And when we do, Lord Thornborough, you won't be able to hide behind property rights. I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm protecting innocent people from a fishing expedition dressed up as justice. After they left, silence filled the hall. Eleanor felt like she couldn't breathe. Judith had sunk down onto the stairs above, her face in her hands. Beatrice was openly sobbing. Well, Lady Catherine said into the quiet, that was unpleasant. They're going to come back, Eleanor said numbly. And when they do, we won't have any defense. Yes, you will. Lucas turned to face her. You'll have me. And lawyers. And every legal obstacle I can throw in their path. Why? The question burst out of her. Why would you keep fighting for us? You heard what they said. Harboring us makes you complicit. Your reputation, your standing, everything could be destroyed because of us. Then it will be destroyed for a good reason. That's insane. Probably. He moved closer, his expression fierce. But I'm done watching powerful people destroy the weak just because they can. I'm done pretending justice is the same as law, And I'm especially done standing by while you and your family are victimized for crimes you didn't commit. You don't know that we didn't. Yes, I do. I know you, Eleanor. You're stubborn and proud and sometimes reckless, but you're not a criminal. Neither are your sisters. And your mother is dying upstairs, which seems like punishment enough, even if you were guilty. Eleanor felt tears threatening again. They'll destroy you. Let them try. He took her hands, and she was too tired to pull away. Trust me. Please. I know I don't deserve it after lying about who I am, but trust me to help you fight this. She looked at him, this man who was somehow both a stranger and the person who'd seen her most clearly, who'd held her in the mud and sat with her mother all night, who was offering to risk everything for people he barely knew. It was insane. It was impossible. It was the only chance they had. Okay, she whispered. I trust you. Something shifted in his expression, relief and determination, and something warmer that made her stomach flip. Good. Now, here's what we're going to do. Over the next hour, Lucas laid out a plan with the kind of strategic precision that spoke of real intelligence beneath the aristocratic breeding. He sent for lawyers from London, not the usual society attorneys, but specialists in financial crimes. He dispatched writers to track down witnesses who could testify to Eleanor's father's solo operation. He even sent someone to the docks to see if there were records of her father's departure and whether anyone else had left with him. If we can prove he acted alone, Lucas explained, it removes the conspiracy angle. They'll have nothing to charge you with except proximity to a criminal, which isn't a crime. They think we know where he is, Judith said. She'd come downstairs finally, her composure fragile but holding. They think we're hiding him or helping him. Are you? No, we have no idea where he went. Mother burned his last letter months ago. What did it say? Judith looked at Eleanor, who nodded permission. That he was sorry, that he'd destroyed everything because he was weak and greedy. That he hoped we could forgive him someday, but he understood if we couldn't. Then some details about accounts he'd closed and debts he couldn't pay. Nothing about where he was going or how to reach him. Lucas absorbed this. The fact that she burned it suggests she wanted no connection to him. That's actually helpful. Or it suggests she was destroying evidence, Pemberton said from the doorway. They all turned. He stood there in traveling clothes, clearly preparing to leave, but his expression was ugly. Cousin, Lucas said coldly. I thought you'd gone. I wanted a word, privately. Anything you want to say to me, you can say in front of them. Pemberton's smile was thin. Very well. You're making a mistake. These people are poison. Whatever you think you're accomplishing by protecting them, it will end badly. Noted. Was there anything else? I'm curious what Father will say when he hears his heir is championing a criminal's family. You know he's been planning your match with Lady Victoria for years. Father's plans aren't my concern. They should be. You're not just yourself, Lucas. You're the future Earl of Northridge. Every choice you make reflects on the family, the title, the legacy. And this, he gestured at Eleanor and her sisters, this is beneath you. The words landed like slaps. Eleanor felt herself shrinking, the old shame rising up, beneath him. That's what she was, what they all were. But Lucas's expression didn't change. You know what's beneath me, Philip? Standing by while innocent people are persecuted, playing political games with people's lives, valuing reputation over humanity. He stepped closer to his cousin. If that's what being the future Earl requires, then maybe I'm not interested in the position. Pemberton's eyes went wide. You can't mean that. Can I? You'd throw away everything our family has built for them? I'd throw it away to be able to look at myself in the mirror. Now get out of my house. After Pemberton left, the room was silent. Eleanor couldn't speak, couldn't process what she'd just heard. Lucas had essentially threatened to renounce his inheritance for them. You can't do that, she finally said. You can't give up your future because of us. I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing what matters. He turned to face her fully. And you matter, Eleanor. All of you do. More than some title I was born into by accident. Your father will never forgive you. Probably not, but I stopped caring about his approval a long time ago. Lady Catherine, who had been silent through all of this, finally spoke. Lucas, I admire your principles, but your cousin is right about one thing. You're not just yourself. You have responsibilities. I know, and I'm meeting them, just not the way Father wants. By protecting people who may very well be guilty? They're not guilty. You can't know that. I know enough. He looked at Eleanor, and his expression softened. I know her. That's enough. Something in Eleanor's chest cracked open completely. She'd spent so long building walls, protecting herself, expecting betrayal. But here was someone offering the opposite. Belief without proof, support without guarantee, faith when she'd given him every reason to walk away. It was terrifying. It was also everything she'd been trying not to hope for. Thank you, she said quietly. You already thanked me. I'm thanking you again. Before Lucas could respond, Dr. Morrison appeared at the top of the stairs. Miss Vance? Your mother is awake, and she's asking for you. Eleanor took the stairs 2 at a time, Lucas right behind her. Her mother was propped up on pillows, still pale, but with more color than before. Her eyes were clear, focused. Eleanor, come here. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, taking her mother's hand. How are you feeling? Like I was thrown from a carriage. A weak smile. But alive, which is more than I expected. Her gaze found Lucas. Lord Thornborough, I understand I have you to thank for that. You have Dr. Morrison to thank, and your daughter, who refused to let you go. My stubborn Eleanor. Her mother's fingers tightened on Eleanor's hand. I heard voices, arguing. They've come for us, haven't they? It's handled, Lucas said before Eleanor could answer. We have lawyers coming. We're building a defense. You don't need to worry. I'm a mother. Worrying is what I do. She looked between them, something knowing in her expression. He cares for you. You know that, don't you? Eleanor felt her face heat. Mother, don't. I'm too tired for pretense. She turned to Lucas. Will you really fight for them, even knowing what it might cost you? Yes. Why? Because it's right, and because, he glanced at Eleanor, because she's worth fighting for. Eleanor's mother studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Good, then I can rest knowing she won't be alone when I'm gone. You're not going anywhere, Eleanor said fiercely. Perhaps not today, but someday. And when that day comes, I need to know you'll be taken care of. She looked back at Lucas. Promise me. I promise. Mother, you can't just, Eleanor started. I can. I just did. Her mother's eyes were already drifting closed. Now, let me sleep. Fighting off death is exhausting. They left her to rest, and Eleanor felt like the ground kept shifting beneath her feet. Everything was happening too fast. The accusations, Lucas's defense, her mother's strange blessing. She shouldn't have asked you to promise that, Eleanor said once they were in the hallway. You're not responsible for me. Maybe I want to be. Lucas, Eleanor, stop. Stop pushing me away every time I try to help. Stop assuming I'm going to abandon you like everyone else has. I'm here. I'm staying. Get used to it. The bluntness shocked her into silence. They stood there in the quiet hallway, and Eleanor felt something shift. A surrender, maybe. Or just exhaustion finally winning out over pride. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. How to let someone help. How to trust that it's real. Neither do I. But we'll figure it out. He moved closer, not touching, but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Together, if you'll let me. Eleanor looked at him, this impossible man who'd turned her world upside down in every possible way, who'd lied about who he was but been more honest than anyone she'd known, who was offering her something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Okay, she whispered, together. His smile was like sunrise, warm and bright and full of promise. He took her hand, his fingers threading through hers, and Eleanor let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe they actually could survive this, together. The lawyers arrived from London 3 days later, 2 sharp-eyed men named Thornton and Davies who looked more like street fighters than solicitors. They spent 6 hours closeted with Lucas, Eleanor, and her sisters, taking statements and building what they called a factual foundation. The key, Thornton explained, spreading documents across Lady Catherine's dining table, is proving negative knowledge, not just that you don't know where your father is, but that you couldn't know, that he deliberately cut you off. He did, Judith said. The last letter said he was going somewhere we couldn't follow, that it was better if we didn't know. Perfect. Do you still have it? Judith shook her head. Mother burned it. Unfortunate, but understandable. We'll work with witness testimony about her state of mind. Davies made notes in cramped handwriting. What about his associates? Did any of them contact you after he left? No one, Eleanor said. The moment the scandal broke, everyone disappeared. People we'd known for years crossed the street to avoid us. Also useful. Shows you were isolated from his criminal network, if there even was one beyond him. Thornton looked up. Miss Eleanor, I need you to be honest with me. Is there any possibility your father had help? That someone else was involved in the fraud? Eleanor met his gaze steadily. I don't know. He kept his business separate from family life, but based on the bankruptcy proceedings, everything pointed to him acting alone. The auditors found no evidence of conspiracy. Then why are they pushing this angle now? Because someone wants us gone, Lucas said from the window where he'd been standing. The question is who and why. Davies and Thornton exchanged glances. Lord Thornborough, Davies said carefully, we need to discuss your involvement. Your support has been invaluable, but it's also making you a target. Are you prepared for what that means? Yes. Your father's solicitor was among the men who came with the magistrate. That suggests the Earl is aware of your position. I'm sure he is. Philip probably wrote to him the moment he left here. And you're comfortable proceeding despite that? Lucas turned from the window, his expression hard. My father's disapproval stopped concerning me around the same time he decided my value was measured entirely by who I married and what alliances I could secure. I'm not a chess piece. I'm a person, and I'm choosing to help people who deserve it. Thornton smiled slightly. Very good. Then here's what we're going to do. The plan was aggressive. They would demand a formal hearing before a magistrate, forcing Whitmore and his allies to present actual evidence instead of innuendo. They would call witnesses, Lady Catherine, Dr. Morrison, local merchants who could testify to the Vance's poverty and isolation. They would produce the bankruptcy record showing Richard Vance acted alone. And they would put Eleanor on the stand to tell her story. It's a risk, Thornton admitted. They'll try to break you, make you contradict yourself, suggest you're lying to protect someone. But if you hold steady, if you tell the truth plainly and don't let them rattle you, it could be devastatingly effective. Eleanor's stomach churned at the thought. When? Next week. We've petitioned for an expedited hearing citing your mother's health and the harassment your family has endured. The magistrate will likely grant it. He won't want to appear overly harsh given public sentiment. What public sentiment? Judith asked. Davies smiled properly for the first time. The sentiment we're about to create. Lucas, you said you know newspaper editors? Over the next 5 days, the case of the Vance family became public spectacle. Carefully worded articles appeared in London papers and local gazettes, detailing the plight of a widow and her daughters persecuted for a father's crimes. Lady Catherine gave a statement, dry and factual, but damning in its precision, about the Vance's treatment at the assembly and the subsequent accusations. Most significantly, Lucas himself wrote an editorial that appeared in 3 major publications. Eleanor read it with shaking hands. There is a particular cruelty in punishing children for their parents' failures. Richard Vance committed fraud. He destroyed businesses and ruined investors. For this, he should face justice. But his daughters, women who had no knowledge of or participation in his crimes, have been subjected to a campaign of harassment masquerading as investigation. They have been socially ostracized, publicly humiliated, and now face legal persecution based entirely on their name. This is not justice. This is vindictiveness. And it speaks poorly of a society that cannot distinguish between the guilty and the innocent simply because they share blood. The response was immediate and divided. Half the letters to the editors praised Lucas's courage. The other half condemned him for defending criminals and betraying his class. Your father is going to lose his mind, Lady Catherine observed over breakfast one morning. He already sent 3 letters, Lucas said without looking up from his own correspondence, each more apoplectic than the last. Are you going to respond? Eventually, when I have time. He set down the letter he was reading and looked at Eleanor. How's your mother? Better. She sat up yesterday and took some broth. Dr. Morrison says the fever's broken. That's good. His expression softened. How are you? The question caught her off guard. In the chaos of lawyers and articles and preparation, no one had asked how she was feeling. They'd asked about facts, about testimony, about what she remembered, but not how she was. Terrified, she admitted. The hearing is in 2 days, and I keep thinking about all the ways I could make it worse. You won't. You can't know that. I can. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, Eleanor. You'll get up there, you'll tell the truth, and they'll have no choice but to believe you. She wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her, whispering that this was all going to collapse, that they'd lose everything, that her moment of hope would be crushed just like every other good thing in her life had been crushed. That night, unable to sleep, Eleanor found herself in the library. She'd been avoiding it. Too many books she couldn't afford to buy. Too many reminders of the educated life she'd once imagined having. But restlessness drove her there, and she was surprised to find Lucas already present, reading by firelight. Can't sleep either? He asked. Too much thinking. She sat in the chair across from him. What are you reading? He held up the book, a volume of poetry. Milton, Paradise Lost. Cheerful choice. Seemed appropriate. Fallen heroes, impossible battles, the struggle against overwhelming odds. He set it aside. Or maybe I'm just being dramatic. You're fighting your own family for people you barely know. I think drama is warranted. I know you better than you think. Do you? We've known each other for what, 3 weeks? 4. And yes. He leaned forward, his expression serious. I know you'd rather fight than surrender. That you measure your worth by how well you protect your family. That you're terrified of being powerless because you've been powerless before, and it nearly destroyed you. That you don't trust easily, but when you do, it's completely. Should I keep going? Eleanor felt exposed, like he'd reached inside her and pulled out truths she hadn't spoken aloud. That's not fair. What isn't? Seeing me that clearly. Would you prefer I pretend I don't? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood and moved to the window, looking out at the dark grounds. What happens after the hearing? If we win, you rebuild. Find a way forward. And if we lose, we appeal. Fight harder. I'm not giving up just because one magistrate is an idiot. Lucas, you can't keep fighting forever. At some point, you're going to have to choose between us and your family, your inheritance, your whole future. I've already chosen. She turned to face him. Have you? Really thought about what that means? Your father will disinherit you. Your cousin will become the heir. Everything you were raised to be, everything you're supposed to protect, it'll be gone. Good. The simplicity of it shocked her. What? I said good. He stood, moving to join her at the window. Do you know what I've spent my whole life doing? Playing a role. Being the dutiful son, the responsible heir, the perfect future earl. I've made myself smaller and quieter and more acceptable because that's what was expected, and I've hated every moment of it. But you can't just walk away from, why not? What is it I'm walking away from? A title I didn't earn? Money I didn't make? The privilege of continuing a legacy built on the backs of people who had no choice? He turned to her. I don't want that life, Eleanor. I want one where I actually matter as a person, where my choices are my own, where I can help people instead of just managing estates and attending parties and perpetuating a system I find morally bankrupt. That's easy to say when you've always had money. You're right, and I know I can't fully understand what you've been through, but I can choose to use what I have to change things instead of maintaining them. Isn't that worth something? Eleanor wanted to argue, but the conviction in his voice stopped her. He meant it, all of it. He was genuinely prepared to walk away from everything for this. For her family, for principles, for the possibility of something different. You're insane, she said quietly. Probably. He smiled. Is it working? Despite everything, she laughed. I don't know. Ask me after the hearing. The hearing was held in the county courthouse, a stone building that smelled of old wood and older grudges. Eleanor wore the blue dress again. Beatrice had cleaned and repaired it as best she could, and tried not to notice how many people had crowded into the public gallery. Helena Ashford was there, along with Caroline and half the assembly guests. Lord Pemberton sat in the front row, his expression smug. But there were also people Eleanor didn't recognize, locals based on their clothes, who watched with curious sympathy. The magistrate was a different man than Whitmore, older, with shrewd eyes and no obvious allegiance. His name was Hartford, and Thornton had said he was fair if strict. "We'll take testimony first," Hartford announced. "The Crown may present its case." The prosecuting attorney was a thin man named Blackwell, who looked like he'd learned to smile from a manual. He called Whitmore first, who testified about the suspicious circumstances of Mrs. Vance's attempted flight and the family's evasive behavior. "They've refused to cooperate with questioning," Whitmore said, "refused to provide information about Richard Vance's whereabouts, hidden behind Lord Thornborough's influence to avoid accountability." "Did you at any point have evidence that the Vance women knew where their father had gone?" Hartford asked. "They must have known something." "That's not evidence, Mr. Whitmore. That's speculation. Do you have actual proof, letters, witness statements, financial transfers, indicating they maintained contact with Richard Vance after his departure?" Whitmore shifted. "No direct proof, but the circumstances suggest—" "I'm asking about evidence, not suggestions. Yes or no?" "No." "Thank you. You may step down." Blackwell then called Lord Pemberton, who testified about the Vances' social climbing and Eleanor's inappropriate relationship with Lucas. "She's clearly using Lord Thornborough's affections to secure protection," Pemberton said smoothly. "It's a calculated manipulation." Thornton stood. "Objection. Speculation about Miss Vance's motivations is irrelevant to the question of whether she knows her father's location." "Sustained," Hartford said. "Lord Pemberton, please confine yourself to facts." But the damage was done. Eleanor could feel the gallery's eyes on her, judging, calculating. She kept her face neutral and her hands still, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. When it was the defense's turn, Thornton called Lady Catherine first. She testified with clinical precision about the Vances' arrival at Thornfield, their poverty, and the harassment they'd endured. "Did Mrs. Vance ever mention her husband's whereabouts?" Thornton asked. "Never. She spoke of him only to express shame at his actions and relief that he was gone." "Did you ever observe any correspondence between Mrs. Vance and her husband?" "None. In fact, I witnessed her burning what she said was his final letter. She was quite clear that she wanted no further contact." Dr. Morrison testified next about Mrs. Vance's deteriorating health and the carriage accident. "She was attempting to leave, yes, but not to flee justice. She was trying to protect her daughters from further humiliation. Unfortunately, her judgment was impaired by fever and emotional distress." Then it was Eleanor's turn. The walk to the witness stand felt endless. She could feel every eye tracking her movement, every mind forming opinions. She sat, placed her hands in her lap to still their shaking, and met Hartford's gaze directly. Thornton approached. "Miss Vance, please state your relationship to Richard Vance." "He was my father." "And where is he now?" "I don't know." "When did you last have contact with him?" "The day before he left England, nearly 6 months ago." "What did he tell you?" Eleanor took a breath. "That he'd destroyed everything, that he was a coward and a fool, that he was leaving and we shouldn't try to follow or contact him, that he hoped someday we could forgive him, but he'd understand if we couldn't." "Did he tell you where he was going?" "No." "Did he give you any way to reach him?" "No." "Has anyone contacted you on his behalf?" "No." Thornton paused, letting that sink in. Then, "Miss Vance, did you have any knowledge of your father's fraudulent activities before they became public?" "None." "Did you benefit financially from those activities?" "We thought we did. We had a comfortable life. But it turned out most of it was built on debt and lies. When the truth came out, we lost everything." "How did that make you feel?" Blackwell stood. "Objection. Feelings are irrelevant." "I'll allow it," Hartford said. "Answer the question, Miss Vance." Eleanor met Thornton's eyes, then looked out at the gallery, at Helena's satisfied smirk, at Pemberton's cold stare, at Lucas sitting in the second row, his expression encouraging. "Betrayed," she said clearly. "Ashamed, angry, but mostly just tired. Tired of being blamed for things I didn't do. Tired of being punished for someone else's choices. tired of having to defend my right to exist because of my last name." The room was utterly silent. "No further questions," Thornton said quietly. Blackwell approached for cross-examination, his smile sharp. "Miss Vance, you claim you don't know where your father is." "That's correct. But you admit he contacted you before leaving. He said goodbye. That's not the same as giving me information. Did you ask where he was going? No? Why not? Because I was too angry to care. Or because you already knew and didn't want to implicate yourself?" "Objection," Thornton snapped. "Sustained. Mr. Blackwell, ask questions. Don't make accusations." Blackwell circled slightly. "You've accepted housing and support from Lady Catherine Pembroke. Housing that conveniently places you near Lord Thornborough, a wealthy and influential man. That seems rather fortunate, doesn't it?" Eleanor felt heat rise in her face. "We accepted housing because we were homeless. Lady Catherine is a distant relative who offered help. We didn't know Lord Thornborough existed until after we arrived. But you've developed quite a relationship with him since then. We've become friends, yes." "Friends?" Blackwell's tone made it sound sordid. "Is that what you call it, when a viscountess's daughter cultivates the attention of a viscount?" "Objection!" Lucas's voice rang out from the gallery. "That's—" Hartford's gavel cracked. "Lord Thornborough, you will remain silent or be removed. Mr. Blackwell, you're testing my patience. Get to a relevant question or sit down." But Blackwell pressed on. "Miss Vance, isn't it true that you've used your father's scandal to gain sympathy? That you've positioned yourself as a victim to manipulate Lord Thornborough's protective instincts?" Something in Eleanor snapped. She'd been quiet, careful, playing the role of the grateful victim because that's what they wanted. But Blackwell's sneer, the implication that she was a schemer, the suggestion that her relationship with Lucas was calculated manipulation, it was too much. "No," she said, her voice cutting through the courtroom. "That's not true. Would you like to know what is true?" Hartford raised an eyebrow. "Please, proceed." "The truth is my father destroyed our lives. We went from comfortable to destitute in a matter of weeks. We were evicted, shunned, treated like criminals even though we'd committed no crime. We came to Thornfield because we had nowhere else to go. And yes, I met Lucas, Lord Thornborough. And yes, we became friends. But not because I was scheming or manipulating, because he was the first person in months who treated me like a human being instead of a scandal to avoid." She stood, unable to sit still anymore. Hartford didn't stop her. "You want to know why I don't know where my father is? Because he cut us off. He didn't want us implicated. He didn't want us to suffer more than we already had. Was that noble? Maybe. Or maybe it was just more cowardice. I don't know. But what I do know is that I've spent 6 months being punished for his crimes. 6 months being judged and condemned and treated like I'm guilty just because I share his blood." Her voice rose. "My mother nearly died trying to escape the harassment. My sisters cry themselves to sleep because they don't know what's going to happen to us. And I've had to watch them suffer while people like you," she gestured at Blackwell, "pretend this is about justice when it's really about making sure we stay in our place. The disgraced place. The powerless place. The place where we're convenient targets because we can't fight back." The courtroom was absolutely still. "But I am fighting back," Eleanor continued, "not with schemes or manipulation, with the truth. We don't know where our father is. We don't want to know. We just want to survive. And if that makes us criminals in your eyes, then your justice is worthless." She sat back down, her heart hammering. She'd just destroyed their case, probably. Let emotion override strategy, given them exactly the kind of outburst they could use to paint her as unstable or guilty. But she didn't care anymore. She was done playing by rules designed to keep her defeated. Hartford was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Blackwell. "Do you have any actual questions for the witness based on evidence rather than innuendo?" Blackwell's face was red. "No, Your Honor." "Then we're adjourned. I'll review the testimony and issue a ruling tomorrow." The gallery exploded into conversation. Eleanor sat frozen, unable to process what she'd just done. Thornton approached, his expression unreadable. "That was either brilliant or catastrophic," he said. "I genuinely can't tell which." Lucas appeared at her side immediately. Are you all right? I ruined it, didn't I? I lost my temper and you told the truth, powerfully. Whether that's enough, he trailed off. They waited through the longest night of Eleanor's life. Lady Catherine provided a subdued dinner that no one ate. Beatrice kept crying. Judith paced until Eleanor wanted to scream. Their mother, still weak but insisting on being informed, listened to the account of the hearing and said only, "Good. It's about time someone said it." The ruling came the next afternoon. Hartford's clerk delivered it by hand, a thick envelope sealed with official wax. Thornton opened it in Lady Catherine's drawing room while they all watched. His expression gave nothing away as he read. Then, slowly, he smiled. "We won." Eleanor felt the world tilt. What? Hartford ruled that there is no evidence of conspiracy or guilty knowledge. He's dismissed all charges and issued a formal reprimand to Whitmore for prosecutorial overreach. He also, Thornton looked up, his smile widening, ordered a formal apology from the Crown and suggested that those who participated in the campaign of harassment should examine their consciences. "We won," Beatrice breathed. "You won," Thornton confirmed. The room erupted. Beatrice threw her arms around Eleanor. Judith actually laughed, the sound rusty from disuse. Lady Catherine permitted herself a small, satisfied smile. And Lucas crossed the room and pulled Eleanor into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. She didn't care. She held him back, tears streaming down her face, relief and disbelief, and joy tangling together. "We won," she whispered against his shoulder. "You won," he corrected. "You stood up there and fought for yourself. That was all you. It wasn't just me. It was mostly you." He pulled back enough to look at her, his expression fierce and tender. "You were magnificent." Eleanor wanted to argue, but she was too happy, too relieved, too overwhelmed. So instead, she just held on and let herself feel it. Victory, maybe. Or just survival. Either way, it was enough. The aftermath was messy. Hartford's ruling didn't erase 6 months of scandal, didn't magically restore their reputation or their father's victims' money, but it did give them something they hadn't had before: vindication. Helena Ashford left the county within a week, the shame of being publicly rebuked too much for her pride to bear. Lord Pemberton retreated to Yorkshire, though not before sending Lucas a letter that was apparently so vitriolic, Lucas burned it without reading past the first paragraph. The newspapers that had published Lucas's editorial now ran follow-ups about the ruling, and public sentiment shifted. The Vances went from criminals to victims, which Eleanor found almost as uncomfortable, but infinitely more bearable. Lucas's father, the Earl of Northridge, arrived at Thornfield 3 weeks after the hearing, his face purple with rage. Eleanor made herself scarce, but she could hear the shouting from 2 floors away. "Throwing away everything for a nobody. My choice, not yours. Disgrace to the family name. I'm done caring about the family name." The argument lasted 2 hours and ended with the Earl storming out, having apparently declared Lucas dead to him. Lucas emerged looking exhausted but unrepentant. "He'll get over it," Lady Catherine said, though she didn't sound convinced. "If he doesn't, that's his choice." Lucas sat down heavily. "Where's Eleanor?" "In the library with her mother. They're reading." He found them there, Eleanor reading aloud from a novel while her mother listened, her color much improved and her eyes clear. They'd moved her to a chair by the window, and she looked almost peaceful. "Am I interrupting?" Lucas asked. "Not at all," Eleanor's mother smiled. "In fact, I was hoping to speak with you. Eleanor, give us a moment?" Eleanor looked between them, confused but stood. "I'll be in the garden." After she left, Lucas sat in the chair Eleanor had vacated. Mrs. Vance studied him with shrewd eyes. "You love her," she said. Not a question. Lucas didn't see the point in denying it. "Yes." "Does she know?" "I don't think so, or if she does, she hasn't acknowledged it." "She's afraid. Of trusting, of hoping, of letting herself believe good things can last." "I know." "Can you be patient with that? With her?" Lucas met her gaze directly. "For as long as it takes." Mrs. Vance nodded slowly. "Good." Because she deserves someone who won't give up on her just because she's difficult. She paused. What are your intentions, Lord Thornborough? To help her rebuild, to make sure she and her sisters are secure, He stopped, choosing words carefully. To be whatever she needs me to be. And if what she needs is distance, if she decides she can't accept what you're offering, the thought made his chest tight. Then I'll respect that, but I won't stop hoping she'll change her mind. You're a good man, better than I expected from a Viscount. She smiled slightly. My husband would have hated you. Because I'm titled? Because you're genuine. He couldn't stand people who actually meant what they said. It made his manipulations harder. Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, did you ever forgive him for what he did? No, and I don't think I ever will. She looked out the window at Eleanor in the garden below. But I forgave myself for loving him, for not seeing what he was, for thinking I could change him. That took longer, but it mattered more. Eleanor blames herself too, for not protecting you all better. I know. It's not her burden to carry, but she carries it anyway. That's who she is. Someone who takes responsibility even when she shouldn't. Mrs. Vance turned back to him. Don't let her carry it alone. Please. I won't. I promise. That evening, as the sun set over Thornfield's grounds, Lucas found Eleanor in the meadow where they'd first met. She was sitting on the stone wall, her walking stick beside her, staring at the distant woods. Mind if I join you? He asked. It's your land. That's not what I asked. She smiled slightly. Sit. He climbed up beside her, and they sat in comfortable silence for a while. The air was cool, carrying the scent of late autumn flowers and approaching rain. Your father left, Eleanor said finally. You heard that? Most of Derbyshire heard that. He was rather loud. He's disowned me. Officially. My cousin is now the heir. Eleanor turned to look at him. Lucas, I'm so sorry. Don't be. I'm not. He met her gaze. I meant what I said. I don't want that life. But it's your birthright, your family's legacy. My family's legacy is built on inherited wealth and social position. I'd rather build something of my own, something that actually matters. Like what? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. He paused. Maybe you could help me figure it out. Eleanor's breath caught. What are you asking? I'm asking if you'll stay. Here, at Thornfield. Lady Catherine has agreed to let you and your family remain as long as you need. I know it's not a permanent solution, but it gives you time to decide what comes next, and He stopped, gathering courage. I'd like to be part of that, if you'll let me. Lucas, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. There's a difference. Eleanor looked at him. This impossible man who'd given up everything for principles and people he barely knew, who'd fought his own family to defend hers, who was looking at her now like she was worth all of it and more. Why? She asked. Really, why do you care so much? Because you make me want to be better. Because when I'm with you, I feel like the person I'm supposed to be instead of the person I was trained to be. Because you're brave and stubborn and absolutely maddening, and I can't imagine my life without you in it. He took her hand. Because I love you, Eleanor. And I know that's terrifying and complicated and possibly the worst timing in history, but it's true. And I needed you to know. Eleanor felt tears slip down her cheeks. She'd spent so long building walls, protecting herself, expecting betrayal. And here was someone offering the exact opposite, unwavering support, genuine care, love without conditions. It was terrifying. It was also everything she'd been trying not to hope for. I don't know how to do this, she whispered, how to trust that it's real. That you won't leave when things get hard or when you realize I'm not worth the trouble. You are worth it. Every bit of trouble, every moment of difficulty, all of it. You're worth it. How can you be so sure? Because I know you. The real you, not the person you think you have to be. And that person is extraordinary. Eleanor laughed through her tears. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you'd fight an entire courtroom to protect your family, that you'd rather be honest than comfortable, that you're terrified of being powerless but refuse to stop trying anyway. He moved closer. That's enough. Eleanor looked at him, at his honest eyes and genuine smile and the complete absence of manipulation or hidden agenda, and she made a choice. She chose to believe him. "Okay," she said. "Okay? I'll stay. We'll figure it out together." His smile was like sunrise. Together. He kissed her then, gentle and careful, asking rather than taking. Eleanor kissed him back, letting herself feel it. Hope, joy, the terrifying possibility of happiness. When they broke apart, she was crying again, but this time from relief. "I love you too," she said. "In case that wasn't obvious. Say it again anyway. I love you, even though you're insufferable and reckless and entirely too confident for your own good." That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. They sat together on the wall as the sun set, talking about futures and possibilities and the life they might build together. It wouldn't be easy. Eleanor knew that. Society wouldn't forget their scandal overnight. Lucas's family might never accept her. There would be challenges and setbacks and moments of doubt. But for the first time in months, Eleanor felt something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Not the naive kind that believed everything would be fine. The harder, earned kind that said even when things weren't fine, they could still be worth it. 6 months later, Eleanor stood in the same meadow in early spring, watching workers build what would become the Thornfield School for Girls, a school for daughters of disgraced or impoverished families, funded by Lucas's personal fortune and managed by Eleanor herself. Her mother sat on a bench nearby, reading to Beatrice. She'd recovered slowly but completely, her health restored along with her spirits. Judith taught mathematics at the school, her sharp mind finally finding proper use. And Lady Catherine, who'd initially agreed to the school project with skepticism, had become its most vocal supporter. Lucas appeared beside Eleanor, slipping his hand into hers. They'd married quietly 3 months ago, a simple ceremony with just family present. The scandal had been enormous, a viscount marrying the daughter of a criminal. But Lucas had faced it with the same calm determination he'd shown from the beginning. "Your father sent another letter," he said. "Saying what?" "The usual. I'm dead to him. I've destroyed the family name. I'll regret this decision." "Will you?" He looked at her, then at the school taking shape before them, then back to her. Not for a second. Eleanor leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. They'd built this. Not just the school, but a life. An unconventional, occasionally scandalous, completely honest life that was theirs. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. On us. Eleanor, I will never give up on us. You're stuck with me." "Promise?" "Promise." They stood together in the spring sunlight, watching their impossible dream take shape. The ruined girl and the renegade lord, building something better from the wreckage of everything they'd lost. It wasn't the life either of them had been raised to expect. It was so much better. And in the distant meadow where Eleanor had once fallen and Lucas had found her, wildflowers bloomed in defiant color, beautiful, resilient, and absolutely refusing to be broken. Just like the woman who'd learned to hope again. Just like the future they were building together. Just like love that proved itself not in grand gestures, but in the quiet choice to stay, to fight, to believe, even when the whole world said it was impossible, especially then.